go and transition from our regularly scheduled meeting into the Vacaville Library Board meeting. And welcome everyone that are here this evening. Good evening. How are you? Nice to see you. Yeah, very good. We're going to establish a quorum and call to order, which we do have. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Motion by Silva, seconded by Kitsis. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Wyndham, your vote, please.
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
And Mrs. Dally? Can you hear me, Mrs. Dally? No? Your vote? Oh, she's muted. You have to unmute her. Sorry. Sorry. So sorry. Oh, hold on.
Okay, I'm good.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So get ready on that trigger down there. We have a few roll call, rest of the votes to go. So item number 4 is approval of the December 12th, 2019 meeting minutes. Any changes to the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Kitsis, second by Wyndham. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Dally, I'm going to start with you. Yes or no? Yes? Okay. Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 5, comments from the floor. These are items either not on the agenda or on the agenda. And just as a reminder, this is for the library board meeting, not for the regular board meeting. Do we have any? All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to number 6. Vacaville Library District 2020-2021 proposed budget. And the Solano County Library Director, Bonnie Katz, will present the district's proposed budget. Bonnie, are you with us?
Okay, so everybody can hear me?
Hi, Miss Bonnie. Good evening. How are you?
Good. How's everybody doing?
Very good.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to call into this meeting. I do appreciate that, even though I know you are meeting in person. So the budget, as per my budget memo, basically outlines everything that is happening. As you're aware, the district will see, because of COVID-19, a decrease in sales tax, and therefore your budget has decreased a little bit, as I stated at the first part, by about $1.46 million. The way we determine the possible sales tax decrease, we did ask the city of Vacaville as what they were anticipating in terms of a decrease in sales tax, and we use that same percentage. So that's how we did. Your budget is balanced. The Library Commission is recommending putting another $1 million into your reserve fund, which now sits at the end of this fiscal year, which would be 1920, at $9 million, as we hopefully move ahead to do the expansion of a cultural center library. So you have a good chunk of change sitting there that if you choose to use it for that project, it would be available to you. The rest is, like I said, it's pretty much a status quo budget. There's not a whole lot except for the decreases in sales and possibly property tax, although I was at the budget hearing, well, I was listening to the budget hearing at the county this morning, and they are not predicting at this point a decrease in property tax, so that's a good thing for the district, because that means that even though we did anticipate about a $200,000 decrease, which is what we were told initially, the county is not predicting a decrease in property tax, so you may have an additional, and we'll know that when we bring back a revised budget to you in September. So although it's a huge budget packet, like 17 pages, really the pages that number 1 and 2 actually go through the numbers. The rest of the pages is the backup documentation that will show you how all the numbers go together. as you can see, your your 2250 charge for service, which is operating in the back of the library, has decreased, and that was because this was, 1920, but 18, 19, 17, 18 was a audit year. The audit was just completed. It's not available right now. We'll bring it back to you at your September meeting. But there was an audit adjustment of 400 and some $1,000, 454, 589 to be exact. So that lowered your our charge of service to you because it's actually the county that owed the district that money, and that's the reason why the charge for service is less. So everything else is pretty standard, unless you have any questions for me.
Go ahead, Michael, or Mike, sorry.
Oh, so
Silva. Oh, hold on. Wrong pen. There we go. Okay.
Hey Bonnie, this is Mike Silva. I just had a quick question. So, with the expected budget cuts, where do you see the biggest impact in your services?
actually, we won't see any impact in our services right now because we have planned and we have a nice savings account, so we will be using some one-time monies to run the county library across the 9 branches that we currently have. So we expect to see probably the county library probably a decrease of about 1.2 to 1.3 million, but we've got enough fund balance to cover that, so we're okay for the next year, and we'll see what happens as we go forward.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So with that item, it's a public hearing, so open this up. The public hearing, if anybody has a comment on this proposed budget. Seeing nobody move very quickly, we'll close the public hearing and move on. Thank you, Bonnie. Action item 7A, adoption of the Vacaville Library District Board 2021 budget that was just presented. Do I have a motion?
Yeah. Go ahead and leave her open. I'll second. Because she's gonna come back.
Okay, a motion by Silva, second by Malberg. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Dally, your vote, please.
All right. This time it's doing very weird things when I try to unmute. So if it's not fast enough and I give you a thumbs up, we'll just go with that, okay?
Okay.
Can you see me, Teresa?
Yes, I can.
So
Okay.
thumbs up works.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Teresa, can I ask you that note? Honestly, I didn't get a chance to read it. Is there anything I need to do right now?
Rather than it projecting, they can see the audience and turning it to see the board. So that's the question, whether.
But they're very pretty people out there. Yeah,
I agree.
I'm good with that.
You're good
Go,
with
go,
that.
go. You can go ahead and make the changes, right? And they came and showed up. That was even better. All right. Item 7B, adoption of resolution number 2, 2019-2020, adopting the GAN limit for 2020 through 2021. Is there a motion by Kitsis, second by Wyndham? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Dally? Okay. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg? Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 7C, approval of the reappointment of library commissioners. It is requested that the board approve and reappoint Beatrice Clark and Carol Sue Robinson to the Library Commission for 3-year terms of July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2023.
I'll second.
Motion by Sean, second by Tracy. Roll call vote?
Mrs. Dally? Okay. Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. Item 8A, the Library Commission Report, the newly reappointed, right? Carol Sue Robinson will report on issues and items of interest. Carol, thank you very much for showing up tonight. We appreciate it and look forward to what you have to say.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I just want to start with a kudos to the Vacaville School District for just falling into line to as fast as they could to meet the needs of our students when this COVID-19 happened, because I know it was a turmoil for everyone. But I have friends who work in food services and in the classrooms and in the offices in Vacaville Unified School District, and just the creativity that's occurred and the jumping into board and making sure all kids are taken care of has really been impressive, I think. Of course, it made me glad I was retired, so I don't have to be that creative. I am not a techie person, but I think the education's been able to move along, and that's the most important thing, and the kids have been able to be fed. So aside from that, the library, it was so hard to watch the library be closed, because I go there all the time, and then to see the drop boxes closed. But the library also jumped on board to be creative in ways that people could use the library. And most of that was through going online and ordering and having curbside pickups for DVDs or books or whatever. And so they're still doing that, and you can go by appointment to the library now. And then some of the programs, especially for kids, have gone digitally so they can see it. Like the summer reading program is now in force, and it is also digital at both libraries, Town Square and Vacaville Cultural Center. So they have the puppet theaters, the ventriloquists, the different arts and crafts shows, the story times are all digital. So if you want to peek in on that, tomorrow is actually the Puppet Art Theater at Cultural Center. And you can look on the Facebook page and see what's happening with that. So again, they're being creative in ways to meet the needs of our library patrons so they don't feel left out. Doing the best that we can, and hopefully this won't last too long. But of course, we don't have the in-visits and they were doing a lot of tutoring, small group tutoring, things like that, of course, are put aside for right now. But it is active, and they are doing the best that they can digitally as much as they can, curbside and by appointment as much as they can. Any questions?
Anybody?
Okay. Thank
No, it's
you.
very nice to see that you were able to adapt, just like
Yeah.
the kudos that you gave to the staff, right back at you for getting access back for our customers to be able to use the library.
Everybody has to adapt, and because we don't want people to go away and not come back, but we also want them to feel safe. And because I know myself, I'm a 24-hour caregiver for my husband. He's terminally ill, and so I have to be very careful about not bringing germs back to the house, and so I have to be careful where I go. So that makes me mindful of the places that are following guidelines and making it possible for everyone, the elderly, the kids, the adults, to be safe and still have access to services.
Very good.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
well, thank you very much. Item number 9, the director's report. Bonnie, I think you're back up to report on the current issues and items of interest to the library board. Hey, Miss Bonnie, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We got you.
Okay, good. So even though we have been closed, as Ms. Robinson said, we have been busy. So a couple of things I want to just brief you on. First of all, the supervising librarian at Vacaville Cultural Center, we promoted her to a branch manager, but have no fear because we now have a supervising librarian from the Sassoon City Library who wanted to come back home. He actually started with the Vacaville Cultural Center Library as a shelver, and now he's come full circle, and he is the supervisor. So those of you who may know him might want to come in and say hi to Mike. Anyway, so those are a couple of staff changes that we have done over this period of time. So, you know, as was explained to you, we are, you know, while we were closed, we did all sorts of, and still are doing all sorts of virtual programming, story times, book clubs. Our literacy folks have been extremely busy. They are doing their one-on-one tutoring also through Zoom. So we haven't stopped providing service. We're just providing service in a very different way. So on, let's see, yeah, I gotta find these statistics. Sorry. On May, you know, yeah, requested holds. So on March 26th, we decided that we would have allow folks who had holds on our shelves to make appointments with us and come in, not come in, but make an appointment, have curbside pickup service, you know, like stores were doing, to pick up holds that were sitting on the shelves. So we started out a little slow, and I'll just give you a couple statistics for your Vacaville libraries. From 326 to 51, the two libraries had 99 holds. From 5-4 to 6-5, you had 196 folks come by for holds. And believe it or not, I've just lost that piece of paper, and I apologize for that. You just had in this past week, because we opened the Cultural Center Library, like I said, on the 15th, you've had 872 people stop by for holds. And the way we're doing it is people make for the holds and for providing materials and things like that. We have people call our 800 number. They make an appointment. They tell us when they arrive, and our staff either will bring the materials out to the person. The other thing that's happened, and like I said, we opened on the 15th. We've opened our three larger branches, being Fairfield Civic Center, Kennedy, and Vallejo, and the Vacaville Cultural Center Library. And from the 15th, and I only have statistics through the 23rd, which is Tuesday, we had 539 visitors to the Vacaville Cultural Center Library. Again, people are making it's by appointment only. We're allowing about 10 people into the facility at any one time. We have a staff person at the door to make sure that you have an appointment. You can call our 800 number to make an appointment. On July, go look at the dates. 13th, we will be opening the Town Square Library. And again, it will be an appointment based. Right now, we are only open Mondays through Fridays. So hopefully, at some point, we'll be able to add either a weekend or a night. But this is the best we can do at this point, because we have to make sure that that not only is the public safe, but our staff is safe. And social distancing in some of our facilities makes it a little, let's put it this way, interesting in order to keep staff socially distanced. But you know, we're doing the best we can, and I think that the public understands and is, you know, starting to use us again. The other thing I want you to know is that the automated materials handling system at the Vacaville Town Square Library is almost installed. So hopefully by the time they open, we will have that working, and that means people can return the materials outside, get a receipt, and you're on the way. We are quarantining our materials 72 hours. We have shields and everything that separate from our public service desk to the public. So we are trying to do all the PPEs that we possibly can. Questions?
I do. If you're going to make an appointment, is that done online? Do you call in? How's that process?
Right now you call in on our 800 number. And that's all on our website. If you go to our website, you'll see it all. Social media, any place like that, you'll be able to see that you can make an appointment.
Very good. Any questions?
So what happens, because we have three branches open, is it comes through our telephone assistance center. They transfer the call to the branch where you want to go, and the branch staff will make an appointment for you.
Very good. Very good. Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. Bonnie, thank you. Shelley, you need to throw something at me to get your attention. All right, hold on, Miss Bonnie. There we go.
When I was on Zoom with your commission meeting, something was
Mhm.
mentioned about science, kids that could check out and
Yeah. Uh,
website, and I
yeah.
help me so I can help other people.
So basically, our children's folks and basically our youth services librarians put together science kits that each library is doing something a little different. You go online, you can see what we have. You can, as a parent or as a kid, if you're interested, you can order one. You can pick it up at the library, and it's yours to keep and do.
Where do you find it on the website? I searched the website for quite a while. Do you know under what I?
It may not. It's maybe on our. Did you look under our programming? I'm not on the website. I'm sorry. Let me get that information to you tomorrow.
Okay, and then I can spread.
Okay.
The word. Wonderful.
Okay. I think it may even be maybe on our Facebook page,
Okay,
but I thought I saw it on the website.
Couldn't find it, so let's help other people
Not,
find it.
okay. I'll make sure I get you that information.
Are we good, Shelley? Fantastic. All right, and seeing nothing else, Bonnie, thank you very much for the report. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the library board meeting, and we'll move back into the regularly scheduled meeting. And we will welcome the public once again. And just a quick reminder, in case of an emergency, of exits on either side of the dais or straight out where you came from. And we'll start with a moment of reflection, please. All right, and Mrs. Malberg, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you, Ms. Cherie. Dr. Jane, any changes to the agenda this evening?
Actually, 18A, facilities update, you can remove that. Mr. Banowitz isn't here.
Did you allow him some time off, or?
Yes, I gave him permission, only a few days. He's camping, so I let him go.
You didn't give me the heads up, because I brought my Giants mask just for tonight, so. Yeah, we'll let this one go. All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda with item 18A removed?
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Malberg, second by Mr. Silva. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Dowd, that's a yes vote. Thank you. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 11, report on closed session. During the closed session, the board discussed 7 student discipline cases, personnel issues, and the superintendent's evaluation for 2019-2020. The following action was taken during closed session. Approve the appointment of Rebecca Pinto as assistant principal, Cooper Elementary School, by unanimous roll call vote of 7-0. Congratulations, Miss Rebecca. All right. Is she up there? Oh, there she. Well, that's not her live. Who's she a fan of? We didn't take that into account.
Seattle.
All right, we'll let that one go. All right. Item 12A, consideration of student readmittance cases. It's requested that the board approve the recommendations for the following student discipline cases: 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20 RA. Do I have a motion? Motion by Silva, second by Tracy. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Dowley, that's a yes vote. Thank you. Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Oh, I forgot you, Miss Stacy, sorry. Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 13A, school district's proposed budget for 2020, 2021. Assistant Superintendent of Business and Administrative Services, Kelly Burks, will present the budget. And then we'll open it up afterwards for public comment. Good evening, Ms. Kelly. How are you?
Hi, great, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Great. There it is. Okay, good. All right. Well, good evening, Superintendent Shamiya, President Jansen, and members of the board. I'm here tonight to present the budget for 2021 for Vacaville Unified. Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. All right, so the budget reporting cycle. So normally it starts in January with the governor's budget. He proposes his budget in January. Then he comes out with a revised budget in May, which this year, of course, was very different from what was proposed originally in January. Sorry if I take this off.
By all means.
Okay, it's just hard to talk and breathe at the same time. Okay, thank you. So the cycle normally starts in January, and then it's revised in May. And it was drastically different just due to the economic state that we were in. And California alone was facing a $54 billion deficit. And so for K-12 education, our portion of that deficit through Prop 98 was $12.3 billion. So that was a very large deficit to try to manage. So in May, when the governor revised his budget, for the first time ever with the LCFF formula, they introduced something called the proration factor, which is a nice way of saying a deficit factor. And so we were facing a deficit factor of the net of the COLA, which is 2.31%, and then a 10% reduction directly cut from education's budget. So the net of that, there's some other calculations that go into that, but the net of that is 7.92% deficit. So now with June, the legislature and the governor have been working very hard in negotiations and have come up with a solution that's drastically different from May. So things have just really been on this roller coaster with not just the budget, but lots of other things. So what they've decided, it's still not signed, but as of right now, what they've decided is that they will not fund the COLA, but they also will not introduce that proration factor. So we won't have that reduction as well, so that's good. But we still won't have the COLA. So that's a good negotiation. It's somewhere in the middle. And then we submit our budget to the county office by June 30th, so we will still move forward and do that. The budget that you are approving this evening is based on the May revise, so it's not pretty, but it will change, so just keep that in mind. And then we may come back with a revision for 45 days, and we would probably do that sometime around the end of August or beginning of September. So that will most likely happen, which I know we have had happen in the past before. So based on the May revise, this is what our revenues look like. And so they are down by that $7 million, which is that proration factor. We did base it on the 1920 P2 average daily attendance. And that's because also part of the Budget Act has a hold harmless clause in there, saying that we will be funded off of our 1920 ADA. So we based it on that. Federal revenues are also down. They've decreased by almost $1 million. And we really don't know what's going to happen with the title program still. They haven't come out with any preliminary allocations. We usually get those in April, but still nothing has been published. And what I think they're waiting on is what's going to happen with the HEROES Act. And so that is still out for decision. And I think once they decide on that, then we will see what those title programs will be funded based on. In this budget, we proposed that they would be based on a 20% reduction. So that's the numbers that we used. And that was just a guess. There was really nothing published. And then state revenues also had a significant decrease of about $2 million. And half of that was the one-time funding that we got for the special ed preschool funding in 1920, which was one time. So that's been removed. Along with lottery, every quarter, at the first quarter, they always do their prior year adjustments. And so we've taken those prior year adjustments out, and that's about $250,000. And then also we had some one-time mental health money from special ed that came through our SELPA, and that was $188,000, so we've removed that as well. And then the state did provide in 1920 those one-time COVID dollars that came to us, that $195,000. So we've removed that as well. So all of those cuts would still remain even if we are added back with either LCFF funding. The other part, though, that we would see increase with this is the categorical programs. So that is for us for ACES, which is that after-school care program, CTIG, which is for the career and technical, and then also adult ed, which is not in general fund, but in Fund 11. So if that comes through, then we'll add back about $300,000, which it looks like it will. And then local revenue, we decreased by $898,000, and that also was one-time special ed adjustment for $755,000. And so that was one time based on a prior year adjustment, so that would also still remain. And then we also lowered our interest estimations because of all the cash deferrals. They're going to be coming. We won't have the cash in the bank to earn interest on. Okay, so then general fund revenues overall are down about $11 million. But of course, we will be restoring about $7 million of that for LCFF, and then some additional dollars back for those categorical programs. And then also what is not in any of our revenues for this year are some of the federal monies that we will receive. And so we're going to get ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, and that's $1.3 million. And we have until September of 2022 to spend those funds. And so I actually did put those in the MYP, but not in the current year's revenues for 2021. I put them in 21-22 because there wasn't a timeline at the time when I built the budget. But now we know we will get those for next year. The application actually came out this week and I've already applied. The other federal funding that is not in our budget is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and we're estimating we're going to get about $4.8 million. It's a lot of money, but we only have until December of 2020 to spend it. And this is for the mitigated learning loss and anything that has to do with the public health emergency. It's very vague in the definition right now. In the trailer bill language, that might be defined down further, so we'll keep an eye out for that. The other federal money is the GEAR money, which is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds, and we're estimating those to be about $250,000 that we'll receive. We also have to spend those by December of 2020, and those also are for the to mitigate learning loss as well. So none of that is in there except for the ESSER funds in that second year, but not the current year revenue. So LCFF is based on a few different things that go into the calculation. This illustrates the makeup of that funding. The blue portion there is our base grant funding, and that's calculated by each grade span and is based on a per ADA amount for each grade span. The green portion is the chart that represents the unduplicated pupil count, which includes our English language learners, our low income, our foster youth, and we don't receive concentration funds because our rate is, our percentage is 45%, and we have to be at 55% to get those concentration funds. And part of that federal relief money, the coronavirus relief funds, were originally going to be based on districts that only receive concentration, but that actually also changed too. So now we are going to see those funds, even though we don't meet that threshold. And the purple section is just some add-ons that were given based on some categorical programs from 12-13 when LCFF was originally enacted. Okay, so then expenditures. So for certificated salaries, they're actually decreasing, and this is in part because of Country High moving to merge with Kimmy, and that's about $1 million. And then also we offered a supplemental retirement program to certificated staff, and we're realizing a savings. We're estimating positions still aren't all filled, but about $800,000 to possibly $1 million. And then we also took the one-time funds from 1920 out of the budget, which was $360,000. And then we also added step and column. So those are those differences there. So they did decrease, but they're for those three main reasons. And then classified salaries are also decreasing, and that's also because of Country High's movement. That's about $300,000. And then also we had the one-time off the schedule for them as well, and that was $175,000, and then plus step and column. And then the increase to benefits is $777,000, and that's a combination of a lot of things. We did put in there the PERS rate increase, which increased about 1% from last year. Then STRS, the governor in his budget did propose, and it stuck with the legislature, to buy down that rate for STRS. So our STRS rate this year will be 16.15%, so almost a full percentage decrease there. We are anticipating that health and welfare costs will still increase. And especially, we don't know what the impact will be with coronavirus and what that will do to our rates for our area. But we're estimating a 5% increase right now with this budget. And then we've also budgeted the 2% rate for OPEB, those other post-employment benefits, for the whole year to put into our trust at the end of the year. And depending on where we're at with cash, like this year, we may or may not make that decision to do that. But we are going to pull it out on each payroll. And then for books and supplies, we're projected to decrease by $2 million. And we had the one-time textbook adoption in 1920, and that was about $1.8 million with ELA, science, and then we also did the one-time tech refresh, which we were very thankful that we did that because those Chromebooks came in very handy with this distance learning. And then the remaining amount is just our planned carryover that we always have every year. We don't put that in at budget adoption, and we'll add that when we actually close the books in September, and then we'll put that in at first interim. And then for services and other operating expenses, they're projected to increase by $457,000. And this is a combination of reducing our travel and conference costs for next year due to COVID-19, and that was about $400,000. We also plan on reducing some of the special ed contracts that we were actually able to fill positions for, which is great for the speech positions. So we've lowered those contracts by about $500,000. And then we've also increased our property and liability insurance, which I know is on the agenda for this evening, by $123,000, and that went up by about 16%. And then supplemental early retirement plan that we offered to the certificated staff, we also have a cost that's associated with that, and that shows up in these 5,000 expenditure lines, and we're estimating that cost to be $650,000. And then capital outlay is expected to decrease by $583,000. We removed the one-time costs that we had in budget this year for, we had a bus engine that we had to replace. We also had an HVAC system on top of Wilsey Wood that we had to replace, and a few other one-time purchases, including a generator for Orchard that we're going to use for the planned power outages that happened this year, and we're estimating will happen again for future years. And then other outgo and indirect, the main increase was the special ed excess cost. And then for transfers out, the contribution changed there because of the contribution that we're going to make to Kimmy. For this year, the $127,000 represents the amount we were going to give of those COVID funds to Fund 13, which is child nutrition, because of the loss of revenue that they've had. But they're actually doing amazing. I don't even know if we're going to end up doing that. They've been doing a great job. And then salaries and benefits account for 84% of the budget. And then the other largest portion of the budget is that services and operating cost. And that's related to leases and contracts and utilities and things that it just takes to run schools. That's the second largest category. And then this is our general fund summary combined. So again, comparing the 2 years, this is based on the governor's revised, so that's why it's not very nice and then nice looking. So we aren't going to even be able to meet the board's 5% reserve if with this example, but we know that we'll be able to add that back when or if we do bring a 45-day revised budget, because we will have at least $7 more million back in our budget just from our LCFF base funding. So when we bring that back, we should be able to add those in, and then also any other assignments that may be needed. We usually assign things that are one-time in nature. So I think the percentage will end up being close to back to that 12% again. So planning factors that we did use, like I said, are based on the governor's May revised budget. They were assumptions that we built our multi-years on for the out years as well. Most of these assumptions come from something called the dartboard, which is provided by School Services of California. And so we know that effective deficit factor line will be removed. And then they also have added additional cash deferrals that will come into play if some federal funds don't materialize by September or October. But that's what they're using to balance the budget instead of the direct cuts like the governor had proposed. So this is the multi-year that you are approving tonight, and it is based on the May revise. We know that it has the deficit factor in there, but we know that we also will be able to add back $7 million into the bottom line, in addition to the categorical funds that we estimated at $300,000. And so that will make this look very different. It also will include all those other changes I talked about on slide 3 with the other revenues. And then our expenditures do include step and column movement in those out years, as well as the statutory increases just to the PERS and STIRS rates and those types of things that continue to increase. Even with the buy down in that third year out, we're going to see a 2% jump just in the STIRS rate. So we'll get to enjoy a little bit of relief for this next year and the following year, but then it will go back up. So that is also included in here as well. And then I think that's all I was going to say on that one. So then I have another MYP in here. I did 3 different ones because at the time I created this, I didn't know what was going to happen. So I did put one in here for if we did get the COLA and then no proration factor. So this was a best case scenario. This is kind of like a pre-COVID scenario because at one point they were talking about funding the COLA. So I did put this in here as an example, but now we know that that will not be the case. So we will not receive the COLA, but we also will not have the proration factor. So that's on the next slide here. So I think our MYP, when we revise it, will be close to this, but still not this. You know, MYPs are exactly right and precisely wrong. So a lot of things have changed since I even created this one just a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So we will add back that $7 million for our base, which is great. And that will make a significant difference in the current year and the out years, restoring those categorical programs, which is about $300,000. And then also those federal funds that we will receive, I need to add about another $5 million back in because that's not in there as well. But those are the ones that we have to spend in 2021 and by December. So it's got a really short turnaround. So we'll add both the revenue and the expenditures when we revise that budget. And then what will be adopted, we think, it's still not signed yet by the state, is the state relying on about $14 billion in federal funding to be received sometime in September. If that doesn't happen, then that's when they would initiate the additional deferrals that could take place. Other good news, though, it's another, I think, $5.8 billion in deferrals. But another part of AB 77, which still hasn't been signed either, but the language in there currently says that they've given us additional flexibility for borrowing temporarily. And so we did Series D of our bond, and typically you can't borrow even temporarily against those funds, but part of the flexibility language that's currently in there right now, I still don't know if it'll get signed, says that we can, which is huge, because if we do end up in this cash deferral situation, which it looks like we will have some sort of combination of deferrals, then we will be able to borrow against that $71 million. So that's really good news. And then just talking about reserves in general, this is our first big downturn in the economy since the Great Recession. So the first graph has the Great Recession levels that elementary and high school and unified districts were at. And then that dark blue column is us, that's VUSD, where our reserve levels are at. So for 07, 08, and then for now going into this next recession, I didn't have 1920 in the graph because that year hasn't been closed yet. So I do have the 18-19 information in there, but then that bullet out to the side there says that we're estimating our reserve will be about 14% when we close our books this year. So we're still not quite at that 17% that's recommended for unified school districts, which is about 2 months worth of expenditures. But it's a goal that we can work towards. It will be difficult during these times though, and obviously funding positions and salaries and those types of things will be more important than reserve levels at that point. But it's just something to be aware of what the standards are. And then next steps is we most likely will have a 45-day revised budget that we'll be bringing back to you. We'll be attending virtually a conference that we actually got as a bonus as part of the May revise. There's no cost for that on July 17th with School Services of California, where hopefully we'll have an idea of what was signed. Well, we'll know what was signed, but then some of the trailer bill language, we may not know all of it at that point, but we should have a pretty clear picture. We don't know yet what the county office will do. They have 3 options at this point. They can approve our budget, conditionally approve our budget, or disapprove our budget. And I was on a call with them 2 days ago, and they still haven't said what they plan on doing. They did recommend all counties in Solano basing their budget on the May revise, knowing that that was not probably what was going to end up happening. So if I had to guess, I would say they're probably going to conditionally approve and then recommend a 45-day revised budget. And then I think that's all I have for now for this one. Are there any questions?
Okay, so your job is like changing every second, right?
Yes, it is.
And then you put a couple teaser slides up there for us of what the budget could have looked like. So
Yes,
thank you for
you're
that,
welcome.
right? But all in all, I appreciate the work that you're putting into this and the projections that you gave us. I do have a question on the COVID money, the one time before December, I believe it has to be spent. Game plan for that? I know maybe not now because we just figured it out, but will we have one by August where maybe we can receive what's the game plan for that?
Yeah, I sent the email out just recently to Cabinet because the allocation just came out yesterday or day before. And so I started start thinking about what we can do. There obviously have to be one time in nature because it's money we have to spend within the next 6 months. I don't know exactly when we'll actually receive the money either. The application for that one is not out yet. The only one I have applied for is the ESSER funding. So I'm guessing the application will be out in the next few weeks or so. And then when we actually receive the money could be as late as September or October. Most likely October because a federal fiscal year runs from October to September. And because they're federal funds, I think that's when we'll actually receive the cash. So if we need to do something earlier to start spending that money down earlier because it is such a large sum, the $4.7 million, then we'll have to do that temporary cash borrowing to be able to fund that as well.
And then if we do the temporary cash borrowing from the bond, is there a payment back with interest on top of that?
Yes, so we do need to take into account the daily interest that would be lost to Fund 22, and we would give it back with interest. And that would be true for any of our funds.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, that's all I have for you. There's a bunch of other questions, so
Okay.
don't go anywhere, right? And we'll go with Miss Tracy first.
Thank you. So I have a similar question. Did I hear you, was it 20 or 21 is the first question to spend the money?
Yes, so we know for sure we will get the ESSER money this year,
Do we have to spend it by December now, 20, or by December 21?
December 2020,
Okay,
for 2 of the pots. We're getting 3 different pots of federal money.
okay. So I'm wondering how, you said it was pretty flexible. So one of the things that has come up, questions that I've gotten is as we're planning for the great unknown, right?
Yes.
And even though we've done such a I really feel we've done a great job, to your point, about technology and anticipating that. Are we allowed to be innovative in creating a fund, or maybe does it have to be expended or allocated?
Has to be expended.
Okay. If families can't afford internet, for example, instead of having hotspots, is that something we could create applications for our system to use that money to help families get the access they need, right? So that
Possibly.
regardless of what phases we're in or what we're having to do in school, out of school, hybrid, whatever happens, that we can ensure that our families have what they need for that. And then, anyway, I'd like to hear more sooner than later, right? How innovative we can be to
The
use
details
those.
aren't out yet. It's just a proposal at this point. Like I said, the application isn't even out yet, so I haven't been able to see those types of details. It did say for mitigating learning loss, and it does mention technology. I just don't know to what degree. I don't know if that would be considered a gift of public funds to provide someone's personal internet service,
Right.
or if there will be some sort of flexibility to allow for that. So I'm not sure at this point.
So I'm looking
It
forward
did
to
say
hear.
technology though.
Yeah. Okay.
So we most likely could use it to purchase Chromebooks, but that would be property of the district, but the student could use at home. But it's hard to get our hands on those right now because everybody's trying to do that.
Okay, so yeah, because with the mitigating learning loss, like what we haven't talked about, most things out there so that it's on record, is this idea of having like cohorts for reading, like it's the same kind of RTI that we did in school if we have to do it in Zoom, right, format, and having the teachers so we can at least do as much damage control now until the next pot of money, whatever next year looks like.
Yeah.
It's just maybe having a think tank or some kind of brainstorm would be cool. But thank you. I'm glad to hear that it's not quite as dire as we thought. And I love the fact that you're having to use a dartboard to do this. So thank you.
Oh,
Sean.
sorry. Can you not hear me on Zoom? Okay, sorry. I do have a quiet voice, sorry.
Me
Doesn't
too.
project very well.
Not so much. Yeah, I tried. Just a couple quick questions. With that COVID money, I mean, so we don't really know what the parameters are with that as
It
far as.
just said mitigating learning loss and technology and distance learning assistance with that, so
Okay.
that's all
So,
we really know.
so it wouldn't be something, because I mean, obviously, the outlook, I mean, there's obviously concerns beyond just this year, and I think we've got a lot more fiscal impact that we're gonna have to endure. Can we use that to sort of supplant the budgetary monies we'd be expending in order to try to increase the reserves a little bit? Because my fear is just that we're gonna see more and more cash flow problems as we go on, so.
Yeah, I don't think that will end up being an option just because it is federal funding. And typically how it works with federal funding is that you have to spend it to get it. It's on a reimbursement basis. And so I would guess, like I said, I still haven't seen the details, that we most likely would only get to keep what we spend and we wouldn't be able to keep any additional funds. The only pot of money that does extend past December of 2020 is those ESSER funds, and we have until September of 2022.
So we could potentially get it in November and they say you gotta spend it next month.
Oh, they're gonna have a lot of fun spending $5 million. It's gonna be fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and the other question, it's kind of related, but do we know what our, what our fund balance for our developer impact fees are? I don't know if you showed that, I missed it.
In Fund 25, the developer fees,
Yes.
After the purchase of the church, it's going to be around $10 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Is that it, Sean?
Yep, that's it.
Michael?
Kelly?
Yeah.
So you could see like we're like vultures up here on the $4.7 million. So I guess the thing I would ask about that is, I mean, we can, obviously everybody, probably has ideas. So my only request, and I'm saying this also to Jane, is that when it sounds like you don't know what the restrictions are yet.
Not yet.
So once we know the restrictions and things, and you guys get to put your heads together about it, that you bring us some choices, say, these are the possibilities. And, then we could either have a very robust conversation at a regular board meeting, or, $4.7 million is a huge chunk of money. So we might even have to have a special meeting for that, just to really lay out and think about it all together. So,
Yes.
Thanks, good report.
You're welcome.
Shelley, anything? Thumbs up, thumbs down? You're good? Okay, great.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes, ma'am.
Way over here, sorry. So I think they're having some trouble hearing on Zoom, so if everybody could speak like directly into the mic or make it closer, that would help.
Are you telling me to be louder?
No, they can hear you fine,
Probably.
but the podium is hard to hear,
Oh.
and Mr.
Sorry.
Wyndham's is hard to hear.
Hey, wait a second.
Sorry,
That was nice.
I'm just the messenger, but thank you.
Okay, if you could please speak louder into the mics, ladies and gentlemen, I would greatly appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
Fantastic. Then with that, no other questions. We'll open the public hearing on the proposed budget for 2020, 2021. Again, the mad rush, not there, and we'll close the public hearing. And then we'll move on to item 13B, the Ernest Kimmy Charter Academy budget proposal for the same years, 2020, 2021. Look, our speaker. Hello, Miss Kelly.
I will try to lean in so
Yeah.
they can hear me better.
You can pull it towards you too.
I tried. It's like stuck on there. I've got it forward as much as I can get it. So, okay. All right, so now we'll go on to Kimmy Charter. Adopted budget, which looks drastically different from the prior year because of the merging of Country High and Kimmy. So when comparing the prior year, sorry, try to lean in. So this is a summary of the revenues for 2021 and an estimation of how we think we'll close for 1920. They are very different because for 2021, we're merging Country High and Kimmy Charter, and they're going to have two different pathways. Kimmy RAP is the Work Readiness Alternative Pathway, which was formerly known as Country High, and then the traditional Kimmy model. And then for them, for their local control formula funding revenues, they are projected to increase by about $1 million. But again, that's because of that combining. And their enrollment, we're projecting at 364, and their average daily attendance at 309. And that's based on combining their historical averages from the past 2 years and using their attendance rate of 85%. Now, something else that also changed with the budget recently with the language in AB 77 is a possibility of a cap on charter ADA. And so it's not been signed yet. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But if they end up capping that, that makes a really big difference for this school because they're going to base it on 1920s ADA. And so for the former Kimmy alone, that was about 190. And so that would mean that we would have to make a larger contribution from the district because we would still be funded as a district for 1920s Kimmy, now former Country High's ADA. And then we would have to make that larger contribution to fund the charter. So that still remains to be seen. So then, using the May revised projections, we also did include the deficit factor or that proration factor here as well. And then if that, well, we know for sure that that's going to happen, that will go away, they would generate an additional $748,000 just based on their LCFF. But again, if that cap comes into play, then we would just again then make that donation or contribution. And then for the state revenues, we removed those prior year adjustments for lottery as well. And then they also had a block grant, the one-time low performing funds, we removed those as well. And that would stay the same. And then for local revenues, that increased because we combined the donations, because Country High, when those donations were made, they were made for those students and for that site. So we've allowed them to take those with them to their new site. And then they also had a grant as well. So they took that as well, which is why those revenues went up. So then again, I've already talked about that contribution. That can look very different depending on what happens with the cap on the possible ADA. But an overall increase of $1 million for their revenues. And then for their expenditures, this is an estimation based on how we think we're going to close. And that's of course based on just Kimmy, not Country High for 1920. But when you're looking at 2021, they increased by about $900,000, and that's again combining the sites. But then both principals did a lot of work to really analyze the positions that were in their budget. And so this actually does include a 4.5 reduction in FTE for certificated, and that's mostly due to unfilled vacancies that were just in the budget, they just hadn't been filled. And they figured since they hadn't filled them all year, they just won't fill those, and they think that they'll be all right by making that decision. And then an art teacher went to a different location as well. And then classified salaries are projected to increase by $228,000, and again, that's combining those sites. They also looked at the FTE and the unfilled vacancies for classified, and it's a reduction of 2.85 FTE. And then for benefits, they're projected to increase by $421,000, and that's due to those staffing changes, and then also the decrease in the PERS rate, but then the increase in the, the decrease in the STRS rate and the increase in the PERS rate. And so we've added that in there as well. And then books and supplies are projected to increase by $62,000. And that's again combining those sites. And then they also are going to add a science lab for classroom based, and then also they're going to be purchasing a kiln for outside for the art class that they will offer. And then we also applied the consumer price index. And then for services and other operating expenditures, those are projected to increase by $220,000. And we're charging 10% administrative fees for those oversight and administrative charges instead of the normal 15%. And that's due to that contribution that we're making. We just decided we did that for 1920, and we're going to leave it the same for 2021. So overall expenditures increased by $1.8 million. So when looking at their multi-year projection and planning those projections for next year, we again use the School Services of California's dartboard. We've taken into account those statutory benefits for the STRS and PERS rates and those other rates that change, as well as the consumer price index and the governor's proposal again. So these rates are subject to change, and this is one of the biggest years ever where we will see those changes. And so when that budget is approved and the trailer bill language comes out, again, we will probably be doing a revised budget for them as well. And then with the contributions, I already spoke about AB 77, so we're going to be keeping an eye on that with those capped ADAs to see how that could impact this charter in particular. And then we've also included step and column movements and the expenditures for those out years. And I'm looking forward to seeing this new school, their new site. I think it's a great change, and I think the students will benefit greatly. Are there any questions?
All right, Mr. Silva, I'll get to you in 1 second. Could I ask that you open up the comments on the section for the Zoom meeting for both items that are on the agenda and not, and we can start making that list ahead of time? Thank you very much. And Mr. Silva, all yours. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Wrong pen.
All right, thank you for the presentation. So I guess my concern is being a dependent charter. I'm not sure how it would impact if we are having more of our students going to under the Kimmy Charter for virtual learning. Would do you foresee any problem with us getting compensated for ADA for that population?
Yeah, well, it really will depend on how the trailer bill of language comes out and what ends up happening with AB 77. Because if we are capped, we still will be funded for all of the students, even with them being a dependent charter. It will just make a difference on whether it comes in under Vacaville, because it's going to be based on prior year for 1920, where in 1920 for P2, which was actually cut off early this year, will be based on our P2 that was cut off at the end of February. And so those students would be counted there, and so that's why I was saying the contribution could look very different, because if they get funded under Vacaville, but then they're at Ernest Kimmy, we would just make a larger contribution to Kimmy.
Okay.
So the funds will be there, it's just whether they'll be under this one or this one.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Okay, we'll open open up the public hearing for the proposed Ernest Kimmy Charter Academy budget for 2020-2021. Would anybody like to speak?
That's a lot. That thing just went crazy. Is there anybody in the chat for this?
I doubt that very highly. Yeah. Sorry, but this is probably not one of those topics that we get a lot of people coming up to. We should, but has nothing to do with the presenter whatsoever. So we'll go ahead and close the public session there. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, with that, we'll go to comments from the floor. Items not on the agenda. And also, this would be a great time if there's items on the agenda that you would like to speak to. If you are on the Zoom, if you could chat that, and we'll track that here. We do have 2 items for later on the agenda for 19K, and we'll make sure that you have those.
It's row in the chat, and
19K.
they're all 19K, and those are from Zip.
Okay,
So right now we have 6 for 19K.
very good. Nothing for items not on the,
Not so far.
okay. Well, why don't we do this? Just leave it open for another couple minutes. If we happen to grab it, that would be great. And then you could close it at your choosing after a few more minutes, just to make sure we give everybody opportunity to speak. Never mind. All right, with that, item 15, superintendent's comments and correspondence. Dr. Jane.
Here. Good evening. Nice to see you all again. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I would like to start with an introduction of a new assistant principal for Jepson, Mr. Greg White. I'm going to ask him to come up here in a minute, say a few words, introduce himself, because he is here. But first, I'll give you a little bit of his background. He has a bachelor's in economics and business administration from St. Mary's, an educational specialist mild to moderate teaching credential, that's special education, and an administrative credential from Touro University. When he was first out of college, he actually worked in finance for many years. And then when he went into education, he actually spent several years as a teacher's aide. And then he taught for 3 years as an educational specialist, special ed at Clayton Valley Charter High School. Then went to the Contra Costa School of Arts, where he was assistant principal / assistant director of special education. Interesting background, and we interviewed him via Zoom, and in the background during the interview, he had a banner he made that said Jepson and had the Jepson Jaguar picture there, and we were so excited to be a part of Jepson and so nervous he got up really early that morning and made a banner, but it was a lot more than the banner that impressed us in the interview. He actually got a little emotional when he talked about education. It was very touching for someone like me, as you can imagine. But now I'd like to ask Mr. Greg White to come up, say a few words, introduce yourself, and you could take your mask off when you talk. Come on up.
Good evening, Mr. White. Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Good evening, governing board, superintendent, Jane Shmia. I wanted to thank everyone who was involved for providing me with this amazing opportunity. Really looking forward to a new position as assistant principal at Jepson. My hope is to get to make connections as quickly as possible with students, staff, families, immerse myself in the community, and get to be a part of the great school culture at Jepson. It honestly, it reminds me of the first day of school all over again. Can't wait to get started. And I look forward to working with all of you, both on Zoom and here as well. And that was it. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I have a very quick update for you. And thank you, Mr. White, and welcome. So earlier this week, this announcement from the California School Boards Association came out, and I think it was a little bit alarming because it talked about Assembly Bill 77, which hasn't passed yet. And it basically had some restrictions around whether or not we could do distance learning. I sent you a lot of information about that. Spent the good part of the past 2 days getting more information. So I wanted to share with you. It wasn't exactly a great, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't a great description of really what AB 77 is. So I want to share with you quickly. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it when we get to the reopening schools plan, because it has a lot to do with that. But AB 77, which has not, it passed through the Senate Budget Committee. It's currently in the Assembly. And it's mainly a bill about budget. It talks a lot about, that's why Kelly referred to it a couple times, a lot about how we're going to be funded and what's going to happen, because things are a little different, of course. But it also includes some language on and expectations and requirements around distance learning and how we're going to start the year in instruction. So this was a language, the first sentence you see there, local education agencies shall offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. So that was first interpreted to mean, well, is this going to be a legal mandate that we go to 100% in-person learning? It goes on to talk about defining an instructional day. And it actually says it will either be in a classroom under supervision of a teacher or in distance learning that meets the minimum requirements described, and they go on to describe it. So right there, that does tell you they do anticipate that there may be some distance learning. The other part that kind of concerned people was it said that distance learning may be offered only if a local education agency at basically district level or school-wide level as a result of an order or guidance from public health officials, or for pupils who are medically fragile. That caused a little bit panic too, because it sounded very restrictive as to when we could offer distance learning. We received, one of the many updates I received was from Kevin Gordon, who works with Capital Advisors. They advise us, we meet with them quite a bit, and they provide us information on legislation and changes with regards to education. And he basically said that these provisions were intended to limit the use of distance learning as the only strategy for instruction, as opposed to a blended hybrid approach. So clearly the legislators do understand that most districts throughout the state are going to be planning on some kind of hybrid approach. They just didn't want to see a full 100% distance learning. He went on to talk about the intent to allow districts to implement this, but limit just doing distance learning, as I said. But they are at the same time strongly encouraging to the best of our ability, in-person instruction. The other changes to the Ed Code that this bill recommends are something called a learning continuity and attendance plan. So earlier this year, we were told that the local control and accountability plan was not going to be due until December. Well, now what they're proposing in this language that the local control accountability plan will not be, we don't need to do it all this year. But we do need to do a learning continuity and attendance plan. Now, I think intentionally they used the same acronym, I don't know, but like I told Mr. Santa Padre, we're not doing an LCAP, we're doing an LCAP instead, right? So, but we still have the due date of December 15th for the first interim budget. So usually we have, they were going to have us have the LCAP at that date. So that's gone. But by the end of September, we have to have a continuity attendance plan, which I think is a great thing because it's going to talk about how we're going to offer a hybrid learning model, how we're going to be able to instruct and help students who may have fallen behind. All these things will be required in a continuity, whatever, the new LCAP. So a little later tonight when we talk about the reopening schools plan, I'm going to give you some more information around AB 77 because what I like in it too, what I saw in the proposed language was that they are actually going to, they detail what they want to see in distance learning. And I think that's really good for us. They talk about they want to see face-to-face or student contact daily, even if it's distance learning, and make sure that all populations get served, special ed, etc. So I will fill you in a little later more on AB 77. That concludes my report. Thank you. No questions.
All right, item 16, board member comments and correspondence. Any? I don't want to go first. Okay, hold on. Michael?
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge just how stressful the past month has been around all the coronavirus stuff and the incredible responsibility that all of us have for trying to decide how we open up school next year. I mean, both sides have just incredible weight and reason behind them. And it just feels like we have to make some extremely difficult decisions. And just the only thing I want to say other than that is that I would really like us to take a look. We have this, one of the things, is $4.7 million or not. But some school districts are doing some really interesting things with cameras in the classroom. And it allows the ability where, let's say, our hybrid model would only really have the ability to do 2 days of teaching and the rest being kind of virtual learning. If we had cameras in the classroom, a teacher could actually do 4 or 5 days of lecturing, and the students could get much more from it. So that's something that I really like to look at and consider. I know that Dublin is looking at that. I know that Twin Rivers is looking at that. So I'm sure that there are many districts that are going to be looking at that. Thank you.
Ms. Stacy.
Thanks. So I just have to say, I am only wearing this mask for Michael Kitsis. This is killing me. I got to tell you, just in this, I don't know how we're going to get through all of this. So I also want to just caution that all of the people in this room, seeing the comments on chat, I feel very defensive and protective of our staff. So, knowing that you can't hear us on Zoom and recognizing that we are distant and the person at the podium is distant from anybody, it was absolutely not inappropriate for Kelly to ask if she could take off her mask so you could all hear her and we could hear her. And we totally recognize, trust and believe, the 7 of us up here are very diverse in our opinion on how we do this, but we're respectful of each other and we have great debate. And you may see that we might have elevated conversation, but it's on the cause of that we're trying to either convince each other to change our mind or find the compromise in the middle, but that's okay. And so I don't want people to perceive that as infighting, we're all very passionate people. But this is a pretty kick-ass team, and so is our administration. So everybody has the best interest of our teachers and our students at heart, and I hope that people can really understand that this is the most multifaceted, probably most difficult decision any of us could have never imagined being in this situation. So I just hope for some compassion and empathy and understand that we really do probably going to need a lot of support and patience and compromise. I just want to say that. So as we talk tonight about how we're going to reopen schools, just from Saturday to today, my mind has changed. And we have to be nimble. And I hope that the community and parents will understand that I'm really proud of our district and actually feel very confident that we are being prepared as we move forward to have lots of different options for lots of different circumstances that we can't predict. So we want to be innovative, we want to be creative and flexible, and I would ask the same for our teachers and our parents, because I am not comfortable with some of the rhetoric of pitting kids' safety against parents' safe or teacher safety, and I hope that we can find solutions. So just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. Mr. Sean.
I agree, this mask is the devil. All right, just a couple things, and kind of listen to Ms. Stacy kind of brought to my mind. The first thing I want to say is, for anybody listening on Zoom or who might see this meeting later on, we really have, I know there's no perfect way to reach out and engage people, and, I've heard people talk about, town hall style meetings. Well, how do you do that in this crazy COVID world that we're living in? I just really want to really express that I think and I say we, being the district staff, I mean, we're trying to take in information, but district staff is really, really trying to really get input from people. Now, obviously, at some point, the board's going to have to take actions, and some of that we may not be able to take into account. It just depends on where things are at, and I think we all understand that things change almost daily, and there's a lot of inconsistency in some of the messaging you hear from different sources. But I do want people to know that we are doing the best we can to try to get feedback and try to give everybody a voice. That doesn't mean that we're going to be able to come up with a plan that's going to accommodate everybody. I wish we could, but that's just not going to happen. And that isn't because we don't want to. And I said this on Saturday, but it really is on my heart. I really think we need to all remember that this is not something any of us chose. This is not something any of us would ever choose. And quite frankly, I don't think any of us ever expected or really planned for. So we are doing the best we can. I think just like everybody in this situation, we're going to make mistakes, just like other people have in this situation. But we're trying our best. And at the end of the day, all of us have different opinions, different ideas about things. But at the end of the day, we want to do what's best for our kids, for our families, and for our staff. So I just want everybody to know that we are really trying to give everybody a voice and take that information into account. I think the other thing that Tracy said that's really important is, I never thought I'd say this, but I think we really have to be respectful of the fact that everybody comes from a different background. Everybody comes from a different place of their perspective. And just because their perspective is different doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think we've really gotten to a place where a lot of times it's easy to kind of feel like, well, if I don't agree with, the people that are in the majority, then I must be wrong. And that goes for the mask wearing, that goes for, people's different opinions, because this COVID thing is probably no more or no less divisive than any other major issue that we're struggling with. And we're divided enough. We have enough mess going on out there. We've got enough people that are just literally destroying themselves and each other. We don't need more of that. And I just want to make sure that we do the best we can from our little world here in Vacaville to really not let this become one more thing that really, really just tears people apart. So we really want to work together and just recognize that we're doing the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Could you turn on Ms. Dowley, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what you guys are saying in that this is an incredibly difficult decision. And just as parents are agonizing at home about what to do with their children and about their children's education, as well as their mental health, we are agonizing about what to do for all the children and all the staff. And I know I've had many sleepless nights over it. And I do want to say that is statewide. I spent a lot of time on the computer this week looking through the different districts all over the state. Most of them are waiting till the beginning or mid-July to make their plans because they know things are constantly changing as the numbers in California are changing with the disease and hospitalizations. And we're going to have to take a look at those kinds of things as things unfold. This is a constantly evolving issue, unfortunately. We didn't do it, we didn't make it happen, and we just want to make it good for all the kids so they can get their education. What I do want to say also is I know we have some teachers who are on the chat tonight, which I really appreciate because sometimes I think we forget. They are the ones that are going to be in the classroom, inside, with those students. We don't want them to get sick because if they do, what are we going to do to educate our children? So I think we have to consider what they say very strongly, as well as what our parents say, what the science says, what the state says, and that's why it's a huge decision. So I hope everybody has the patience to wait this through and help us to make these difficult decisions, and we're just doing the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Anybody else? All right. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for the emails that we've been receiving. I know we're pretty much getting them all consistent. I do ask for a few things. If you want to call us names, don't send an email. Your point is pretty much lost if you want to call myself a name or the board names. It's gone. I really just don't pay too much attention to it. You want to have an open discussion like adults, and I'm sorry for looking at you folks. I have nobody else to look at. And then, I have no idea who. Sorry, I know. It was like, he's looking at me. I have that same feeling in church when the pastor is talking. I swear it's to me. Sorry, Pastor. Okay. But with that, adult conversations, love them. Don't try to yell at us with all caps. Don't call us names. It doesn't hurt us. It slides off. But my point is, your point's not taken then, from at least me personally. I'm not speaking for the board. I want to hear what you have to say. Everybody is different. All the points that we said tonight, and again, we didn't choose to be in here. We will make a decision, and I guarantee you, will not make everybody happy, but we'll make a decision and go forward. And I want to make that decision based off of the input from the students, the parents, the staff members that we have putting in. I think this is the most emails I've gotten in the last week or so, and I appreciate them. I read every single one of them, even the super duper long ones, but read every single one of them, and then your point is put into my bank. But again, if you don't treat us like adults, like the way we would treat you, then your point's lost. Again, speaking for myself, not for the rest of the board, that's just how I feel. So with that, we'll close the board member comments. Anybody from the bargaining units like to speak this evening? No? Good to go. Fantastic. And we canceled 18A. We'll move on to 19A action items. This is the adoption of resolution number 36, 2019-2020, authorizing designated staff to contract with the California Department of Education for state preschool funds. Okay, moved by Ms. Tracy, second by Mr. Sean. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Dally, that's a yes. Thank you. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitzis? Yes. Sorry. Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
And can you repeat who made the motion in a second, please?
It was a second by Ms. Tracy, or motion by
Motion.
Ms. Tracy, second by Sean.
Thank you.
Very good. With that, 19B, approval of the district budget that was presented earlier. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it. I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Cherie, second by Ms. Tracy. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Dally, that's a yes vote. Thank you. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitzis? Yes. Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 19C, approval of the budget for Ernest Kimmy Charter Academy. Do I have a motion? Okay, great. Motion by Mr. Kitzis, second by Mr. Wyndham. Any questions? I forgot to do that last time. Seeing none. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Dally? Yes vote. Thank you. Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kitzis? Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 19E, adoption of the operations written report the local control accountability plan for Ernest Kimmy Charter Academy. Do I have a motion? Or, well, I'm sorry. Let me introduce Associate Superintendent Ed Santapadre. I was just taking care of business
That's
and,
okay.
no.
Are we doing Kimmy's? Is this the one first or the district one? District.
You're all kind of discombobulated.
Yes, district.
Okay.
All you.
Good evening, President Jansen, board members, Superintendent Shamiya. I know there's a lot going on tonight, so both of these reports will be very quick. You have the written report. They're very similar to the ones we brought 2 weeks ago for the other charters. So I'll just hit on each of the questions, really quick highlights. First question was provide an overview of the changes to the programs in response to school closures. Our district, our staff, our teams, our teachers did a great job of pivoting quickly. We developed the distance learning plan that included grading standards, expectations of students and staff, and distance learning platforms. Individual schools also did a great job during this time to continue with activities. There were teachers who were performing songs and dances, art projects, virtual signings and celebrations, and dress-up days during the week. So they really did a great job. Question 2 is how did we support the needs of English learners, foster youth, and low-income students, in addition to our technology department delivering over 5,300 Chromebooks to students to use during this time. Our foster and homeless, our community liaison, Rayanne, reached out individually to every foster and homeless student to make sure they had, in addition to Chromebooks and to know about the meal plans and where those were, she was connecting them with other services in the community that might be helpful. Our English learners continued on with their English learner development through their ELD teachers and moved along very well. And we had our team contacting families to see what additional things they needed. Had a great Zoom DLAC meeting that was really, really fun. For the next one, how do we continue the high quality distance learning opportunities? This is a big shout out to all the teachers who are on Zoom and watching. The subject matter teachers and the grade level teachers got together and really created the learning targets and essential standards that our students needed to get through the year. And then one of the things I think that kept high quality education was the grading practices for the high school that we all struggled over. Remember, it was really a tough decision. I have to say our teachers graded with grace. As we went through, they understood situations and they really, really did a nice job of keeping the learning going and understanding that this was unprecedented. Another star among us was Juan and the child nutrition team. They were the first ones out of the gate. They just responded. There wasn't a lot of meetings. They started cooking, and they had meals delivered, and they have continued, as Kelly has mentioned, to continue to serve our community, and they understand their value in that. And then lastly, the description of steps taken to arrange for supervision. We worked with the Solano County Office of Emergency Services and had a plan ready in case we were asked to provide child care for essential workers, and we were not asked to do that, but we were ready to go. That is the plan for the district. Questions?
No.
I'll make a motion. Motion by Michael and second by Sean. Questions? Shelley, good? Okay, roll call vote.
Mrs. Dowley? That's a yes vote. Thank you. Mrs. Smallberg? Yes. Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yep.
Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Why did you sit down?
I'm not really going to do this one,
Oh.
but I'll introduce who is.
Well, let's go with the 19E, Adoption of the Operations Written Report, the LCAP for the Ernest Kimmy Charter Academy.
So again, we're going to have Mrs. Chancellor, who I see on there. If we could unmute her, she's going to do the same and give you the Kimmy report. Thank you.
Very good. Good evening.
Yeah, hello, good evening. Thank you, Ed, for the introduction, and it's good to see Dr. Shmaya. Thank you for having me, board members, President Jansen. I appreciate your time. I will make this brief. For Kimi Charter, it wasn't as much of a difficulty in shifting to distance learning as we were already a blended learning institution. So we had a lot of distance learning components in place. For us, it was moving our classroom-based classes into Google Classroom and onto Odysseyware, and having our classroom teachers then utilize the same kinds of supports that our regular personal learning plan teachers use. In addition, they did things like adding video links and Khan Academy, and my science teacher made kitchen science kits, and we had open office hours twice a week on site for students and parents to come and pick up supplies and drop off homework and get books and Chromebooks and all of the kinds of things they needed. So our teachers really, they stepped it up with regard to communication with families and students. Because they didn't have their weekly personal learning plan meetings, they made up for that with Zoom meetings and conferences on the phone and every other opportunity they could find. With regard to the second question, English learners, ours are reclassified learners. We don't have any English learners, but we continue to support our reclassified learners through bilingual personal learning plan teacher support, and again, links to other kinds of supports where they could connect with Google Classroom and find additional help. Our foster youth and low SES borrowed Chromebooks from campus that were provided by the district. Check those out, and we're taking advantage of reduced and free internet and the internet hotspots that then became available through the district. The steps we took, our transition started with the Blackboard and Facebook and webpage and individual communication to all families, so that we were all on the same page. Our staff did a wonderful job cheerleading and supporting and saying, come on guys, let's get on board, and our families were responsive. We did have teachers work collaboratively to identify essential standards and to modify assessments so that students could do things from home and still have a high quality education. So that was fabulous. Steps taken to provide school meals were done through the district, and obviously with the distance protocols established and personal protection utilized, families were able to take advantage of meal service and continue to take advantage of that meal service through the summer. To arrange for supervision, as Mr. Santapadre mentioned, the plan was ready, and we didn't need to use it. So I think that was a fabulous thing, though. We were prepared, and I feel like Kimi Charter did a wonderful job, as did all of our other schools, in helping children continue to be successful. We continued mental health outreach as well to our students through Upward Bound and our mental health clinicians in a better way. So all of our components were still in action, just in a different way. Any questions?
Any questions for Lois? No, Lois, thank you very much.
I'll move it.
All right, moved by Ms. Tracy, second by Ms. Cherie. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Dally, your vote? That's a yes, thank you. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 19F, it is requested that the board approve Kelly Burke's Assistant Superintendent Employment Contract for the term of July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2022. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Wyndham,
I'll second it.
second by Mrs. Stacy. Comment by Michael. I'll get you here in a second. Hold on. Not paying attention. There. No, I just rejected you. Rejected.
I'm hurt.
I know. I know. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
And no laughing at me in the booth.
You know, I just want to very simply say, Kelly, that I don't feel like we've missed a beat. And I think that we've gotten all the material we need in a very clear way, and I thank you.
And more? Fantastic. Roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Dally, your vote, please. That's a yes, thank you. Mr. Wyndham? Mr. Wyndham? Oh, sorry. It's okay. Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 19G, it's requested that the board approve the Northern California Regional Excess Liability Fund 2020-2021 pro forma estimated contribution premium summary for property and liability coverage in the amount not to exceed $928,550. And
Wanna come up in case you
was
have
that
any
you just coming up to
questions?
say thank you?
No,
For-
but thank you.
Oh, okay.
But thank
I
you
was
very
just
much. I appreciate the opportunity. I just came up in case there was any questions. It is a 16% increase from last year. It's a $124,000 increase, and we're actually in a really good place. Some of the other areas around us, they increased by 50%.
50?
50.
Wow.
So 16% really isn't bad, considering. The thing that makes the biggest difference is that they consider that some of the things that happen now are more regular, for example, fires. And so that's increased the cost of insurance overall for California. So if there's any questions, I'm available.
I'll make a motion. I'll second it. Yeah.
Question, motion by Ms. Cherie, second by Ms. Tracy.
Thank you.
Yep. And roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Dahlia, your vote please. That's a yes vote. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yep.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg? Yes. Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 19H, approval of Vacaville Adult School name change. Principal, Tiffany Donahue is going to come talk to us. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I can pick this off.
You're all good.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Board members and Superintendent Shamia. Okay, I'm sorry, I just can't do this. I'm trying, I really am. So why the proposal to change the name of the Vacaville Adult School to the Musetta Thrower Adult Education Center? Because our school is more than just a school. It supports and prepares adult learners. Let me begin first by acknowledging the name Musetta Thrower and some of her contributions to the education community in Vacaville. Mrs. Thrower started working in the district in 1977, which meant that I would have been 3, and moved to Country High in 1983. After serving in various administrative roles, she became the principal of Country High in 1991, which led to the school district's Student Services Department until she briefly retired in 1999. She was called out of retirement in 2002, which is the same year I actually started working in the district as a special ed teacher, and filled in as an interim principal again for Country High until 2003. Even in retirement, she remained very active in the education community, which many believed she never really retired. Mrs. Thrower found that education and setting goals was essential in student achievement. Mrs. Thrower was highly respected in the community and retired from the Vacaville Unified School District not once, but twice. In 2008, her supporters honored her by renaming the Ulatis Alternative Education Center, also known as Country High, to Musetta Thrower Education Center. Sadly, Mrs. Thrower passed away at her home in Reno, Nevada, after a battle with cancer on Thursday, April 1st, 2010. So now that leads me to, why do I want to go with this name? Well, now that we're moving to a new location, the opportunity was presented to me to provide a signage for our new building. I thought to myself, what's going to happen to Musetta's legacy once we move? After speaking to many retired community stakeholders, colleagues in the district, current and former students, the only answer was to bring her with us and let her legacy live on through the vision of the adult school. We provide more than just an education. We support goals and provide a purpose. She would say, my belief is if someone does not have a goal, they will not attend school. Why would anyone go to school if they do not know where they are going? So the best way to honor Musetta Thrower is to name the new Adult Education Center after her and continue to create pathways for adult learners to achieve personal and academic goals that may last a lifetime. So in closing,
As you prepare your thoughts about the name change, I want to leave you with this last words. I'm trying not to get emotional about it, of Harriet Tubman. I go to prepare a place for you. The Musetta Thrower Adult Education Center will strive to prepare for adults to set goals and follow their dreams. I hope to make Mrs. Thrower and her family proud by advocating to have her legacy live on for a lifetime to the community of Vacaville. So, thank you. Thank you. I also created a logo already, so I can pass it down for y'all to see if you don't mind.
Fantastic. And I know Ms. Shelley would like to speak, so if we could bring her up, that would be great.
I just want to add that I was in the district almost, well, her entire career also. And Musetta was a person who reached students who had given up on themselves, as well as had others give up on them. She was an amazing woman who made all of us more conscious of making sure that all students were successful. So I think it's fantastic to continue her legacy. Her name was part of the learning part of Country High, and I think it should live on in our district. So I really support this, and I'm so glad that you thought of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Any questions?
Yep.
This is beautiful.
Thank you.
This is,
I
and
appreciate
you're going to
that.
leave this as your tagline? As
That's,
part of it?
yes, I think it goes perfectly with that. The roots are here in Vacaville. You got to go through the Musetta Thrower Adult Education Center, and the leaves are just endless of opportunities. Okay? Any questions? Do I need
Anybody
to?
else?
You know, I
Thank-
always want to sit down, so.
Well, don't go anywhere yet. Hold on. We need to finish this one up. No questions, but
Okay.
it's go ahead.
You have to turn his thing. That came out all kinds of.
Yes.
Thank you. So, so I think that was very heartfelt, and I really appreciate you taking the time to honor, with somebody who I've known through a lot of kids that I grew up around, whose life that she touched, and it doesn't escape me or I think anybody else that that she represents really what being an educator is about, and the difference that we as educators can make in the lives of others. And I'm sure she's very proud of the legacy that you are continuing and honoring for future generations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Anyone else? Fantastic. With that, can I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Tracy.
Shelley, do you want to move it, Shelley? Yeah.
Motion
Let
by Ms.
I'll
Shelley,
second it.
second
Let
by Ms.
Shelley.
Tracy. Roll call vote.
Thank you. Mr. Wyndham? Yes. Mr. Kitsis? Yes. Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tiffany.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
All right, approval of contract number 19I with BMR Health. It's requested the board approve the contract with BMR Health in the amount not to exceed $125,120 for speech and language services for the 2021 school year. Moved by Ms. Malberg, second by Mr. Kitsis. Roll call vote.
Mr. Jansen, can I make a couple comments?
By all means.
This was the contract for speech and language, and I think you all might know that we're really excited that we've actually hired 6 speech therapists, and there's one more going through the process. Sasha's not here tonight, but she emailed me, want to make sure, because that's phenomenal. It's not only going to save us money on these contracts, but we're going to have like real live part of our staff speech therapists. So I just want to take an opportunity to celebrate that a little bit, and that's one of the reasons these contracts will get smaller in amount.
Very good. Great. Thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second, right?
Yes, we do.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Mrs. Deli? That's a yes. Thank you. Mr. Wyndham? Yes. Mr. Kitsis? Yes. Mrs. Stacy's not there, right? Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg? Yes. And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, 19J, approval of the contract. It's requested the board approve the contract with Division 5-15 in the amount not to exceed $118,155 for the Wilsey Wood Schools Girl Locker Room HVAC Replacement Project. And this is a Measure A project item. Do I have a motion?
I'll make it.
Motion by Mr. Wyndham, second by Mr. Silva. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Dowell, your vote? That's a yes, thank you. Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Get a bit tiring. Yes.
Mrs. Wyndham? Mr. Wyndham, I'm so sorry. Mr. Wyndham. See, Mr. Kitsis got me all confused. And Mr. Jansen,
Yes.
thank you. Sorry,
Hey,
Mr. Wyndham.
We have about 12 or 13 speakers, so before we get going on the next item, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Let the board take care of business if they need to, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes and continue from there. All right, thank you.
12 or 13 on the reopen. John?
What's that?
On the reopening of schools.
19K, yeah. I'm sorry.
She's having difficulties, technical difficulties.
Okay. Fantastic.
I keep trying to pump that thing back in and it won't go on, and then I'm afraid it'll break.
We okay? We good? I'm shortening them. Yeah, I'm gonna go 2 minutes each, and then we'll go over on the allotted time, but much needed. And we will get going. We have many speakers tonight, so to relatively stay within the same time frame that we have, we'll go over a little bit. We're gonna shorten everyone's conversation to 2 minutes. I need someone to time. Can you be my timer for me, please? And we will go in order, starting with our 2 cards that we have here in person. So this is item 19K, reopening of the schools discussion. Let's go with Miss Samantha Dubs first. Good evening, and how are you?
Good evening. I'm going to try to keep my mask on because if that's what I have to get ready for, then I feel like I need to be practicing it.
Practice.
So as much as I would like to take it off, I'm going to give it a shot. So my name is Samantha Dubs. I've been a teacher at Willis Jepson for 10 years. I sent an email to you guys. I'm going to just go over some of that. When I sat down to write to each of you, I didn't know where to start. The whole thing is overwhelming. It's a great deal of anxiety. But one of the things, I mentioned some personal circumstances, and I know I'm not the only one that has those family members that are compromised. But one of my big things is that I teach health. I understand the importance of social, mental, and physical health. That's the basis of our class. We talk about that. I know that these students need school to maintain a balance of these 3 things. I want nothing more than to see these students return. But given the situation at hand, I not only question the safety of us returning, but also what it's going to look like. Because school as we know it is not going to be the same for who knows how long. My class is centered on pair shares, group projects, stations, interaction. The same is true for many of my colleagues. When we return, how can we do our best teaching or even close to it? I see a lot of issues with the proposal at hand. Our 90-minute periods without being able to do any engaging activities, what we want to go back to? What if there's a spike and our new 7th graders who haven't had an opportunity to build a relationship with us have to now balance 6 classes online? What do we do if we have symptoms or test positive? Teachers don't pay into state disability. And are we going to have substitutes that are willing to step into now a high-risk setting? Rushing to make a decision could be detrimental to our community. We cannot make everyone happy, but we shouldn't be compromising our safety here. I am asking you to please give your teachers a voice. We have not had adequate time or consideration here. We have not been asked what we want to see. We haven't been asked for our ideas. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for reading my email. Good night.
All right, Beth Kelly.
Thanks, this is Valley. All right, well, thank you guys for having us tonight and listening. Kind of along the same lines, I wrote an email as well, and I have gone through the Vacaville School District myself. I've been a teacher here for 7 years. I've also coached for 10. Personally, I have health issues that concern me about what our plans are. One, a baby. Two, an autoimmune disease that caused me to step down from my athletic director job last year. And a mother-in-law in chemotherapy, waiting for a stem cell transplant. Lots of things, and everybody has these, I know. I understand. However, my concern is the voice of the teachers. I see a lot on social media from parents and try to restrain. I don't comment. I don't actually have Facebook. People send me screenshots of what's going on, and I get more information from that than I have been getting through my emails, either through the district or through our VTA. I've been trying to stay up with it. I know that there's a committee that is working on these things, but they have not reached out to us to try and see what we think, especially at the middle school level in particular. We would like our constituency to be heard as well as the parents. That is the main concern. We get applauded all the time for how creative we can be, what the different things we can do, what we can come up with. And I would just like the teachers to have a chance to do that, elementary through high school. And it just personally has not felt like that to me yet. And I've been trying to pay attention and stay up to date. So thank you for reading our emails, and hopefully you guys, we can figure something out.
In the order that they were handed to me, we'll go down next. Corey Penrose. Corey?
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Good evening, we can.
Awesome. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Corey Penrose, and I've had the distinct honor and privilege of teaching for 24 years at Vacaville High School. I love what I do. It's an amazing school serving some amazing children in an amazing community. And I thought I'd seen everything until March of this year, when all of a sudden things changed. And it's scary. It's difficult. I don't envy the position that all of you are in, because you and teachers and all of us are having to wrestle with some really difficult choices. There are so many logistics, there are so many problems that we have to deal with. It's difficult to know what to do. What I do know, however, is this. Our committees in this district have been doing some amazing work trying to deal with the many, many difficult issues that we're facing as we attempt to reopen schools safely. I would encourage this board to continue to please work with those committees and ensure that we open our schools in a safe and responsible fashion. Follow what the committees are saying. Follow what the science is saying. This is a tough issue, and science and fact is always the best way to go. But perhaps most importantly, I want to emphasize the importance of taking care of teachers and kids as we reopen. You have the power to cast a vote to ensure that our children and our employees have a safe working environment. Please cast that vote well. Please take the lead on this issue, and please continue to do the good work which you've already been doing. You guys are stalwart advocates for kids in this community, and I'd love to see you up there, and I'd love to talk with you. Please continue to do the good work of advocating for our teachers, our employees, and our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Penrose. Next, and I'm going to butcher your last name, so I'm not going to say it, Miss Miranda M.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, it's Marina.
What?
Hi.
The last name. Okay, got it.
Hi, I'm Miranda Marino. I've been a member of the Vacaville community since 1992 when my family moved here. I went through the Vacaville school system, and I've been a teacher at Woolsey Wood for the last 10 years. I have several concerns about safely reopening our schools, but I would like to focus on two of what I think are the most important ones. My first concern is about social distancing in the classroom. It will be impossible to social distance if we fully reopen and go back to our normal schedules. My classroom is similar to many classrooms in the district in that the desks are pushed together and there's little to no space for further distancing. And also, like many other district, my room has no windows that can be opened and fairly poor air conditioning and air ventilation. With the recent spike of COVID 19 cases coming from indoor gatherings, I think it would be very wise for us to create indoor gatherings for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. I think it will put our community at risk, and because this, not only the staff and the students will be exposed, they will also go home to their families in the community. Um, it's imperative that we do everything we can to follow the CDC recommendations and continue to social distance to minimize exposure and possible cases. And my second major concern is what happens when a student or a teacher gets COVID 19. Um, if a student's infected, will all of their classmates and their teachers go on a 2 week quarantine? At the secondary level, that would be 6 teachers out for quarantine. And if a teacher is infected, how many of their students, will all of their students need to do a 2 week quarantine also with staff members and other teachers who are exposed? And another question I'd like
Okay,
to
Miss Miranda, you're going to have to wrap it up. Your time's up.
Okay, and
Okay.
also I just, if the COVID, if we have to keep our teachers healthy because they are the, um, they're the bloodline of our education, and um, it's just, I just ask that the board does everything in their power to make sure that we keep our community, our teachers, our staff, and students healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda, for your comments. Shelley Hebert? All right, Shelley.
Oh, there we are. Hi.
Hey, there you go.
Okay,
Good
can you
evening.
hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm going to read a statement and I'll try to condense it and keep it down to 2 minutes. I'm a math teacher at Willis Jepson, where I have taught for 17 years. I love my job. I love my students. I love the staff. We have an excellent school. I have very many concerns about the proposals being floated right now. I'm going to focus, though, just on one concern, which echoes some of the things that other people have said tonight. It's about safety, specifically about the effects of opening schools on the broader community. Like Samantha and Beth, I have someone that I care for who has a compromised immune system, my mother-in-law. And she's in my quarantine bubble. She relies on me. I can't not help her because she has no one else. And she is very frail. So that concerns me greatly. I'm also concerned about our students. How many of them live with their grandparents? How many of them are cared for by their grandparents? How many students have a family member who's expecting a baby? All of these people are at additional risk. What happens to these families? Excuse me, a little emotional here. What happens to these families if the students bring COVID home from school? We are all part of the same community, and we must all work together to protect each other. When we reopen schools, we need to do so in a manner that is safe for everyone. If we don't, then we risk our schools becoming the center of an outbreak with disastrous effects on the community. I teach in a standard-sized classroom. I typically have 30 to 35 students. If we bring back 50% of the students at a time, I estimate, I'm pretty good at estimating, I'm a math teacher, I estimate that they would be about 4 feet apart, probably, not 6 feet apart as per the guidelines. If we bring 100% back, there is no space between them. They will all be breathing each other's air all day long. It will be not safe for them, or for me, or for our families. According to the CDC, the more people a student or staff member interacts with, and the longer that interaction, the higher the risk of COVID-19 spread. Full-sized in-person classes, activities, and events are categorized as highest risk. Any proposal that eliminates social distancing or tries to open the school at full capacity before there is a vaccine violates state and national guidelines and is not safe. We would all like this crisis to be over, There's nothing I would like more than to be able to return to a full classroom.
Okay.
That would not be safe.
All right,
I know that for
Miss Shelley, if you could,
Yes, am I
uh,
out of time?
yeah, if you could wrap it up, that'd be great.
Last statement here. As you weigh the options, I ask you to look out for the safety of everyone in the school and our extended community. Thank you so much.
Shelley, thank you for hanging around and thank you for your comments. Jared Rupalato.
Good evening. Thank you, board. My name is Jared Robolato, and I'm the activities director and a teacher at Wilsey Wood for 15 years now. I love my job. The moral test of a government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped. That's Hubert Humphrey. As of today, the Solano County Department of Health says that we have 42 new cases of COVID among youth in the previous 12 days. In our nation, the youth make up 4% of the overall cases, but in Solano County, it's actually double that at 8%. California, as you probably heard, eclipsed 7,000 new cases in 24 hours as of Wednesday. That's a new record, which beat the previous day's new record of 6,000, which beat the previous day's new record of 5,000. That's a dangerous trend. And while some of those numbers can be attributed to increases in testing, the positivity rate of those tests is increasing also. And we are currently setting hospitalization records this week. We are one of 7 states in our nation doing so. The federal health officials said on Tuesday that a surge in new infections in more than a dozen states, including California, could worsen without new restrictions. As a member of Wilsey Wood, I know someone who I worked with who had a family that went through this COVID crisis. The things that he mentioned to me that this did to his young son are nightmare-inducing. Young people can suffer from this, and they do. I have an 8-year-old that goes to Cooper, and while he would try his best, he would fall short of the necessary social distancing measures if he was put in a position that made them too difficult, like having too many students in his classroom. The highest risk thing we can do right now during this pandemic, according to scientists and health experts, is spend time in an enclosed space with people outside of our own home. Doing so without a mask dramatically increases the chance of infection from one to another. Please take into consideration the guilt that would weigh on all of our consciences if a child or a teacher in our district died because of a decision that we put convenient logistics over the lives of our most vulnerable. Please also give thought to our district's financial solvency if the liability for a human life was placed on us for going beyond county, state, or national safety guidelines. Please limit our class sizes to 10 students at a time and make masks mandatory for students and staff. A recent University of Washington study put the mortality rate of COVID-19 at 1.3%. We can't stop COVID yet. Our goal has been to slow it down, but it's speeding up. Most of us are still at risk of getting it. I don't know how many students and staff we have exactly in our district, but what is 1.3% of that number? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jared. Miss Emily Feel, and again, I apologize if that's why I'm not a teacher. I'd be bad with names.
Hi, can you hear me?
Well, I got you, Miss Emily. How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. At Saturday's board workshop, we heard about the plans for reopening if we have to come back with less than 100% of our students in our class. There were some good options that lots of people have worked hard on. One plan that was especially good was the plan for the special education department. Because the students in the special day class or in other specialized classes often need more repetition and consistency in their routines than the peers of typical ages, the special ed team came up with a plan to have those students come for shortened AM or PM sessions 4 days per week. This was a good creative thinking. Tonight, I'm advocating for our kindergarten students. Like those special education students, these young learners need repetition and consistency. So would you please consider allowing the kindergarten classes at the schools that have the space to follow the special education AM and PM schedule?
Perfect. Is that all, Emily?
That's it.
Thank you very much for your input. Appreciate it. Next, Beatrice Cadenas, please.
Hello.
Hello, Beatrice. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank
Good.
you for having having me on this public comment. I have a question. I was looking at the agenda and I wanted to know if the um, the proposed budget for 2020-2021 for the fiscal year for the Vacaville Unified School District is posted online somewhere. I saw that on the agenda it said attachments, but I didn't see where those attachments were. Um,
Jane?
Hi, Emily. Did you, if you went onto the agenda online, okay, so if you went to the agenda on the board's webpage where it says board agenda meetings, minutes and all that, that's just a PDF. You have to go to the agenda online link, which is on that page. But if you would like to email me tomorrow or tonight, I can give you my email address and then I can send you the documents you're talking about. That might be the easiest way to get it without me going through the whole web page, if you would like to do that.
Perfect. Can you put your email in the chat box?
Yes, I'll do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Perfect. Is that it, Beatrice?
Yeah, that's it for tonight.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Stephen Power.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
So well. Thank you for letting us comment. I just wanted to echo everything that all the other teachers have already said. In particular, like it seems like a huge mistake to aim for reopening everything and making things be as close to the way they were before as possible, given the current spike in cases both in the state and nationally. But in particular, I really wanted to emphasize my sort of shock at hearing that there's even a possibility that we would not require masks. That there's this idea that if people who want to wear masks or people who feel uncomfortable without a mask should be able to wear a mask, which is not the purpose of that policy. So I would want to maybe emphasize that in the way that we require everyone to be vaccinated because because the issue is that the entire community be protected, we don't allow people to just sort of choose not to do that. This is such a serious public health crisis that something that seems really so simple and honestly one of your cheapest remedies really should not be optional. That's all.
All right, Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Helen M. Helen, are you out there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi there, how are you?
Good.
The floor is yours.
Okay. I too have been teaching in Vacaville for decades now. And I'd like to thank our technology department and the school board and administration throughout the district for their quick response to the COVID emergency. It allowed me to flip my classroom and was able to start teaching in creative, interactive lessons by the following week. I was delighted with the family response I received. I teach third grade at Markham. To illustrate the success of my distance learning, I'd like to talk about a boy in my classroom. This young man is an English second language student with focusing difficulties. He lives in a 20 by 8-foot trailer. His parents do not speak English and I do not speak Spanish. Despite these difficulties, this 8-year-old made accelerated growth with distance learning and finished the year with more than a year's growth. I attributed this success to his parents being given access and support to a Chromebook and the wonderful administration at Markham who reached out to every parent. It was a huge job on their part. And the parents holding that child to be accountable in sending me text messages and responding to me each time I contacted him. encouraged me to embrace the unknown and know that we can be successful with flexibility and cooperation. I think that's going to be the name of the game from here on out. I do feel it is necessary for students to attend school at least once a week. I do encourage that social distancing. I think just coming to school, even at a young age, once a week is important for connections and accountability. The reason I wanted to talk to you today was to reassure you that distance learning does work, and I strongly urge you to continue to put safety first, even though there are many pressures to distract you from that. Thank you so much.
Helen, thank you very much for your comments, and then also your nice words for the technology team and everybody else that stepped up. So thank you. And last but not least, Eric Estes. Eric, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
I've got you. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you for having me leave a comment. I just want to speak, really kind of echoing a lot of concerns that a lot of my colleagues have made. But I do want to speak really from the perspective of being a younger teacher. I do not have 7 years in the district, so I'm not eligible to take something like a personal leave of absence for a year. I do not have a lot of leave bank that's been added up to be able to kind of confidently and adequately feel like I can take care of myself should I get sick. I am in a single income household, so I have to work. And so I really hope that when you make considerations on how you keep us safe next year, that you make choices that are equitable and really do a good job at following recommendations, not just requirements, and keeping us safe. Because I want to do my job well, but none of us can do our job well if we're not physically well. So please, I really hope that the board considers mandating PPE and also social distancing practices in the classrooms next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the comments. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Jane. Before I do that, these are the conversations I like having. People that have input, that are positive, that vary differences of opinions. This is really what this time is for. That's just make the emails that way, and we'll be good.
Somebody got him.
I was standing up for you guys.
Hi,
I don't know why.
Again. So Beth Kelly and Samantha Dubbs. Samantha Dubbs, right? Okay. Yeah. I've been in your classroom. You're both fabulous teachers, so thank you. We had a large committee, as you know, and I sent out some emails telling people to reach out to their supervisors with recommendations and ideas. I think there might have been something missed. Hang on a minute. I don't know. Don't want you to see the survey so I can talk about it. There might have been something missed in the middle school, and middle school's different, and we need to really focus on that. So Mr. Santapadre already said, I was going to suggest that you reach out to them, but I think he already beat me to that and reached out to you. If you'd be willing, and maybe some other middle school teachers, to meet with him and share your ideas, that would be great. And I'm sorry about that, and if it were missed, but we still have time. We'll work together. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the parent survey results. As you know, we spent the time together refining the questions a little. It's so hard to draft a survey. It gave us some information. And then I am going to talk a little more about AB 7-7 and basically ask that we do put off the decision until we meet in July. But I'll let you know some things we're working on. But I really would like to see where this bill goes if it becomes law, because it will give us some guidelines. And there is some work, it sounds like we might need to do more on the plan. So the survey, as you know, went out Monday evening. It closes Saturday. And the reason I didn't close it today was because I really did want to give people ample time to fill it out. I will come back with you with the full results, but we did already get 4,703 responses. But I will follow up with the others. So this shows the breakdown of where the children attend who participated. When you see those percentages, for example, it says Alamo, 8.1%. That doesn't mean 8.1% of Alamo. It means Alamo responses represent 8.1% of the responses. So Vaca High has the highest responses, percentage-wise of all the responses, because they have the largest enrollment of students. This shows the breakdown of grades, which is pretty evenly distributed. We did, as was asked, and Mr. Wyndham, you asked me in an email about TKK incoming. That was some of the feedback we heard from parents. Why aren't you asking the incoming? So we were able to poll the families that are already enrolled, and we had about over 700 names that we pulled, so they were included in the survey. So the first question was, under the current level of COVID in Solano County, which learning environment would you choose? 54.5% said all students return to campus full time. Continue remote learning was about 11%. Each child attends 2 days per week with 3 days remote learning was about 20%. Elementary attend 5 days per week, 8:30 to 12:30, and secondary attend 4 days with Wednesdays off, is what that question was. And that got about 17%, and 14% said it's too early to determine. If VUSD started school with all students full-time with no social distancing, but with precautions in place, what would you choose? And they said come back to school, that's about 60%. Remote learning, 19.4. I feel that it's too early, about 17.5, and neither choice is acceptable, almost 8%. To ensure social distancing, if VUSD opens school with your child attending 2 days per week, 8:30 to 12:30 elementary, full day secondary, what would you choose? And 48.9 come back to school with this modified option. 30% didn't like either choice, and remote learning is about 10%, and too early to determine is 9%. If we open elementary 5 days per week, 8:30 to 12:30, and high school 4 days per week, no social distancing but precautions in place, what would you choose? Again, about 54% said they'd come back. 18% is not comfortable with either choice, and we've got about 16% remote learning and 11% too early to determine. So what we do know, I believe that under any circumstances, we would probably have 15 to 20% of our families that would choose the virtual option, which is information that we wanted to know. And it's like a lot of the surveys, the last survey we saw, it is kind of all over the place. I will give you updates if we get more between now and Saturday, but it's around 50-60% that would come back if we open fully. Any questions or comments or
Ms.
more
Tracy.
information on the survey?
So this really polarizes from the feedback we've gotten tonight from teachers. So maybe I'm asking a preemptive question, but do we have results tonight from a teacher survey?
No, I'm going to work on one based on that, but I really want to sit down with VTA, with Todd and Brenda and talk about it. I talked to Brenda briefly, but I want to do it with VTA.
Okay, so my first thought is that overwhelmingly, we have at least 50% of parents who are like, let's go, and with precautions, whatever that looks like, right? But we do then have 50% of people who are not comfortable with let's go, and we need more time. So to Sean's point on Saturday, though, I'm wondering whether you do a town hall or we just keep surveying as we're realizing there's new questions to ask. Because he had brought up a point of if we knew how many families weren't comfortable, then we would be able, or maybe our decision would get easier. So this is like pretty 50-50, right? So if we understood if those other 50% were willing to sign up now for distance learning or the virtual learning, then that gives us a sense of how many chairs, and right? So we can problem solve differently because we have more information. It's kind of where my head's going.
I don't think we'd have 50% that would sign up for the virtual learning.
I understand,
I think it would be 15 to 20%.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I understand where the teachers are coming from.
Yeah.
So I had just, in full transparency, asked, and I think everyone's in agreement, that one of the concerns that was shared with us is this idea of signing a letter of intent without like understanding what we're signing. I think that's a completely fair concern. And so we had asked if there could be an extension to wait. So I know administration's going to work that out.
Yeah,
so
we'll work on that.
because if I was a
Absolutely.
teacher right now, I'd be like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now?
Yes.
So, but I also just, did I screw up?
All on the same page.
Okay.
The intent to return is mandated by EDCO. That's not something we can be flexible on. It's the request for leave that we can be flexible on. The request for leave is what's in our contract that we can extend, but the intent to return is June 30th. There's no flexibility on that because
That was the question I asked. Okay.
I thought you were talking about leave request.
So it's mandated by state law?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We thought you were talking about a leave request,
Request for leave
which is
request.
different than intent to return.
Okay, so we can talk offline because
Yeah.
I can see the dilemma here.
Mhm.
I think it's a fair
Mhm.
quandary to try to sort this out. Okay.
Okay, anything else on the parent surveys?
Yeah, don't go anywhere. Mr. Kitsis.
Yes. So I feel this isn't the time for a whole conversation because, you know, you're going to go back and you're going to look at AB 77 and we're going to look at things. But I just want to make one thing just really clear from my perspective is that in looking at this, my number one job is to pay attention to the health and safety of our students, our staff, and the community. Now, there are some very heavy other things. I mean, education is enormous, but, you know, just you know, because, you know, I don't know, truthfully, I don't know how many people and how well people are following the science. So, and I also know people want to get back to school, and I respect that, like, immensely. But for me, the health and safety of the students and the staff and the community is my number one important way of looking at things, because you can't take that back. I mean, I think just like Jared said, which just really hit me, is that, you know, there are people's grandmothers and there are people who have chemotherapy and there are people that, you know, they're not expendable. And it's important that we pay attention to that.
Mr. Wyndham, and then Shelley, you'll be after Sean.
So, thank you. So I think we heard pretty much exclusively tonight from teachers, and I think that's a good thing. But one of the things that was said that really did bother me, and I know that there's a lot going on, but I think it's really important to make sure that staff knows what happens if there's a positive test. Because at some point, we're going to have to, I mean, we can talk about how all that's going to, how we're going to do this, but the reality is this thing isn't going away. We already heard the science say that the vaccine, even when we have a vaccine, we don't have any way of knowing if that's a lifetime vaccine. Is it 2 or 3 months? Is it a year? We don't know that. So we're probably years away from that part of the implementation. So we're going to have to be struggling with this. So it's really important to me that staff has some understanding. I know from being in a profession where, you know, I'm exposed potentially. Well, I used to be. I guess not so much anymore. Now that I'm a GIMP, watch it. You know, we already know because our chance of exposure is higher, and so we know what happens if there's a positive test. So I just think it's really important. That probably has been stated, but it's easy to miss, and I just really hope we can sort of at least put that out there so that people understand and know what to expect.
Can I ask a question? Do you
Sure.
mean what happens at the school site?
Well, I think they're just talking about leave and, you know,
that, okay.
is there, I mean, does that come out of the sick bank? Because I know, like, for me, and again, it might be different in the role that I'm serving in. Watch it. I can see
There
John's wheel
was some
spinning.
communication that Human Resources sent out.
I'm sure there was. I
about-
just think maybe it might be worth sending out another time or two, just so everybody's on the same page.
It was fairly comprehensive about what happens with sick leave and around leave and COVID.
Because I think it's easy for people to miss. There's a lot of noise going on right now about a lot of stuff, and you know, you talk about the science, and it's just there's a lot of different things that people get locked up on. So I just think maybe we can, if we can at least reiterate if it's been put out there,
Mhm.
so everybody kind of knows.
Mhm.
Can I make a comment real quickly, just in support of that? But I don't want to miss the other half of that, and maybe I'm making it up, but when we go back to school, because we'll go back to school eventually, and a teacher, a student becomes positive, what's the game plan?
And that was what we talked to Dr. Matthews from Public Health about. Sorry, I didn't mean to point at you. On Saturday,
How dare you?
That came up with Dr. Mateus. He did speak to that because I gave him a question to that, because our duty is to, if an employee tells us, our duty is to tell public health and follow their lead. That's what we're supposed to do. And they will tell
Right,
us whether or not what to do, whether or not to close the school, etc. Isn't that your, Chris, was your
No,
understanding?
I took that as well, but
Yeah.
the immediate, what do you do? Will they promise us they'll get back to us in 20 minutes? Will they, I mean, if we have school starting, do we let the kids come back? I mean, I think that game plan and that part needs to be solidified a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe get some overall general direction from them if
Yeah.
someone is.
Yeah.
Let's take a time out until we can get good information from them and then make a good plan for the safety of both
Yeah.
the students and the staff.
Mhm.
And that's, I just wanted to tag on that.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, I
for
appreciate that,
interrupting.
because I just think it adds to the anxiety when people don't know, and I'm sure there's been information that's been put out there, but it bears, I think, repeating, because that's one thing, maybe one little piece that we can help alleviate. You know, the other thing I just want to mention, I think this AB 77 thing is kind of interesting to me, because, I mean, to me, this is a recognition of what I think a lot of us probably suspect or know, and that is that there's a lot of students that distance learning doesn't work for, and there's going to be a lot of education loss. And so, and for some, it might work just fine, but for, I would guess, probably a large number, that's not going to work as a model long term. And the reason I say that is we look at, we listen to the input we got from staff, but also from parents. I don't know what the right answer is, and maybe there isn't one. Like I said earlier, it's going to make everybody happy, but here's the reality of it. If this thing goes on for a year or 2 years, which I think is very reasonable, we heard that from Dr. Machis or Matthias, however you say his name. So we heard that from him. So this is not a short term. This is not something that's just gonna be part of the year. This is likely gonna be this year and into next year. So I think while health and safety absolutely has to be a priority, and it is, I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this if it wasn't, but education is also a priority. There's certain things that we have to look at, and what I took away from Saturday was there's certain things that we have to have in order to function as a society. If this was 1 or 2 months, we already kind of hopped in a foxhole for 2.5 months. It didn't work. So, and I'm not saying we just run out there responsibly and throw the doors open and everybody but at the same time, we really have to look at going forward. This is a long-term situation potentially. This isn't just a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And so as we look at this, I think we really need to understand that this has got to be whatever plan that we land on, and I don't know if there's any right or wrong answer here, but that has to be something we can live with for a year or 2 years, and that the students can live and function with educationally, because that is another part of it, and it's a reality. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. If we could bring up Ms. Shelley, that would be great.
Hi. I have a few comments. First of all, I really appreciate the teachers giving their point of view. And I think that one of the pieces of the survey that's missing for the parents is the teacher's point of view. Because as we know, parents want the best for their kids, which is to be in school and get educated. And I think this pandemic's made it seem as if children don't get it and they're going to be safe together. But even in the news today was a birthday party of 18 adults with some kids there, and 2 of them have contracted it. It's either there's asymptomatic children or they may get it. And so they can transfer to the teacher, as well as the teachers are out in public doing their thing, and they can transfer to the kids. So I think one of the teachers brought up something really important, which is the step beyond what you've been talking about, what happens if, is the quarantine issue. So if one child in a cohort of 15 gets it, will the entire cohort be quarantined? Most likely, yes, because that's what athletes and celebrities, all of them you hear about. This guy on the team is now quarantining, self-isolating for 14 days. If that's the case, what does that mean for a family? What does that mean for the teacher? If the teachers exposed. Now they're quarantined for 14 days, if that's the way the public health goes. So I think there's a lot of things to consider. That's information that somehow we need to check on and also share with parents. I think a lot of the things that the teachers talked about, the thing about the highest risk is being inside for any length of time with poor ventilation. And I think we need to look at some of our classrooms where the ventilation isn't appropriate and figure out how we're going to maybe use some of those COVID dollars to fix that. I think it's not just about how many people die from COVID-19, it's also about the long-term effects. I mean, unless you have not been paying any attention to what's going on, people have effects on their lungs for years to come. We don't know what the ramifications are, and it's not that I live in fear. I want to live, and I want to make good choices. It's why I don't smoke. I've made that choice that is not a good thing to do, and I think that's why secondhand smoke was made such a big deal out of, because if you live next door and the smoke sneaks through, you possibility of cancer. And I think we just have to be really careful of our children and our teachers, and there's a lot of information and ideas that our teachers have about their own health and the health of their children and their classrooms that parents need to look at and maybe would feel differently about coming back full-time. I think full-time is what they most likely would love to have, but it may not be the healthiest thing for all involved. So I think those are pieces we need to continue to look at, and that's why I'm glad we're not going to make a decision until at least the beginning of July, when this assembly bill comes through, or yes or no with some more information. But also we need to keep looking at these questions and answers and figure out how to share more information with parents. Thank you.
Perfect. Tracy.
So I stopped so I could organize my thoughts earlier. So I just want to throw out, there's so many unknowns that I support not, doing it. One of the things I'm wondering is, as we're brainstorming, I feel like we have a lot more work to do. So I'm curious if we can start adding the timeline to the work. So, we used to go to school, the first day back after Labor Day. Like, it's 2 weeks, right? I'm wondering if time is the tool we need, because not just for opening, but like to take the flexibility where we have options to do things. But like when it comes to everyone's concern, I had a conversation today, and Bayla really reminded me, because I was asking about graduation. I was asking about some school stuff with the spike and the fear of like how far in advance we needed to be looking at this. And he suggested that the phases are still moving forward. So unless something changes, we don't know what next week looks like. If the numbers continue to rise, who knows if we're going to go backwards, right? But that the protocols, the distance, masks, hand washing, or no mask, whatever that looks like, they're still safer, right? We haven't had this risk conversation. He said you may want to start with agreeing on what risk level you want to take. Because what I'm hearing is that all this input is coming from a different barometer of risk. And I think everyone has the right to make that choice for themselves. And what I'm hearing lost is that for every teacher that has the right, every parent should have the right to decide the safety for their kids. So we're asking parents to decide if they're not safe in the school setting to consider the virtual option. So I think we just need to be really honest of what flexibility and options do we have to give our teachers, because there's going to be a line where there is no more options and people are going to have to make choices. Right? And then just having the really uncomfortable, honest conversation around schools compulsory. So we have 1 year of kind of reprieve because of the budget giving, right? So if we lose a bunch of kids, we can weather the storm. If things are going to change, the landscape's going to change. But a teacher may decide that they can't teach in our district because we can't give them what they need, right? And I don't want anybody to feel like that means that we don't care about them. But we're clearly not going to give everybody what they need to feel safe. So I just feel like we have a lot more work to do. And I know nobody wants more meetings, but I feel like we just haven't had the whole conversation. And we can't do it in like this kind of thing at 9 o'clock at night. But I feel like there has to be more workshops or more groups of people in one room with the attorney and Bayla present to give us all the high level information. I don't know. Sorry.
That's not up to me. That's up to the board.
Well, I'm throwing it out there. No, it's a lot more work. work, but I feel like
Okay,
there's clearly holes in our conversation. So that's what
Miss Cherie.
One of the things that stuck with me was Dr. M, because I'm not going to try and pronounce his name.
Just Bailiff.
Um,
That's what I call it.
He said that we know that if one child is in the gym and has measles, it's airborne. Everybody now has been exposed. This is not that. And so he did say he would not have closed schools because this is not that. This is very contagious. People are getting very sick, but it's not that. But yet we can't truly have this conversation today. We have 60% of our parents are saying go back from just the survey, and we'll see. We need, obviously we're not done with surveying because we're not hearing the whole story because we have not heard from staff. We have until the email started yesterday, we had nothing from staff, and so we don't. This is a piece of the picture, and it's an extremely valid.
We did
piece.
have a teacher survey regarding before the plan. So
That's
something,
thank
yeah,
you. Yes.
yeah, we did.
So
have,
in this, but
yeah.
here's the other piece of this.
Yeah.
Because I would love to say, let's make a decision right now, move forward so that we can get ready because we're already behind the 8 ball. But the problem of it is it changes day by day.
Yes.
So, and we don't have all the information like you opened with to make the decision today. So, yeah, the 60% is huge for me. It's profound. And the fact that I don't know where the teachers stand and who can work and who cannot work in these. We have to know who's safe to come back and who's not safe to come back, who wants to come back and who doesn't before we can even have it.
So one of the issues around that is there are teachers waiting to know what the plan is before they make their decision. So it's totally
So we need to have
chicken and the
this
egg.
is my in my
Completely.
perfect world. We need to know this is plan A. It's independent study or you're all back full time, right? Whatever plan A, plan B, plan C, and get a rating from parents and get a rating from staff. So we're doing apples to apples instead of what we're doing right now.
No, because honestly,
No.
you just did it to Sean. Can I tag team with you?
So I have another part of my presentation that's very short, and it's telling you what we're working on. I just wanted to pause to hear, about the parent survey, and you can continue after that. Maybe I can just finish real quick.
I'll stop.
Is that
until
okay?
I think
That's
there's a
all
lot
right.
of comments that still want to go. So can we? Is
Okay,
it about?
it's
Hold
about
on.
the survey.
It's about the survey, Sean. About the survey. Ish. Tracy.
It was about that exact right now.
Okay. So Miss Tracy, go ahead. I didn't forget you, Miss Shelley. You'll be here shortly.
So I think Cherie's got a good
Sorry,
point.
Brandon. Thank you. He's sorry, back and forth.
I think that Cherie's point's well taken, and I think that we shouldn't have to. Teachers shouldn't have to wait. I think that they have to inform, and so I think we're kind of maybe did that backwards a little bit because if
No,
teachers
I'm
already
talking
know
about
what
a
their
teacher
limitations
making
are.
a decision whether or not they're going to come back or if they're going to take leave. A lot of them might make that decision based on what the plan is. You might be a teacher that says, if the district decides to bring back all kids full day, I'm taking a leave. I can't.
We
Or
would need to know that
that's what
ahead
I'm
of time because that may inform our willingness to tell parents,
Yeah.
we hear you 60%, but guess what? Our workforce can't sustain that.
So we're
And they're just
working
as,
on the
like,
survey
yeah.
as much time as we have in a day. So
I'm just saying,
yeah.
I don't think we should wait on that information. I agree with Cherie, should inform.
I'm not waiting on a survey. I'm not waiting on that for teachers.
Miss Shelley. I'm sorry, she was first. I have the text.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to add that another piece of the survey did talk about the distance learning, and another piece of what parents need to understand is the difference, which I think is maybe what you're going to go into, Jane, of what distance learning was and what it will be, because I think we were in survival mode, doing the very best we can, and learning as we flew the airplane. And now that we've had the airplane flying, we know what works, what doesn't work, how to be more interactive. And if kids can come to school at least part-time, they will have much more accountability. They will have other children to motivate them. The work that other kids are doing will motivate them. And also, my comment from Saturday, I think resonates here also, is that when you have fewer children in a classroom, you can teach almost twice as much. I know that from watching kids and schools. So those are important pieces that do attach to the survey. Thanks.
You ready, Michael? Oh, let me get you up here. There we go. Okay, all yours.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, so here's, there are lots of questions, but I think there are only a few that are important to me. And here's what it comes down to. People talk about 54% of the parents or maybe 60% of the parents want to come back and they'll come back. So the question is what you think about health and safety. If you think that it's not safe, do you care if 54% of the people want to come back? Would you just say yes because the parents wanted that? If 54%, I'm not talking to you.
But yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, hold on. So, well, but what about the other 46%? Aren't those people important? And that comes to the secondhand smoke argument. You can't smoke in front of me like that. It's against the law. And why? We're infringing upon your right. And the reason why we're infringing upon your right is because it's unsafe. So if I think it's unsafe, 54 doesn't get to say what the other 46 or even the other 26 should do. Now, if you think it's safe, then I completely agree. So but I think that's the way we're going to have to look at it.
Mr. Jansen?
Yes, Ms. Malberg, what would you like?
Oh,
you want to go?
No, I was just saying that.
Hold on.
What I want to say is that in everything we've done, we've provided option. I do not believe in railroading anybody into a decision. I believe in options for parents, and I believe in options for staff. And I think I've been really clear on that from the beginning.
Oh, okay. So could you put me on for a second, John? So where is my option? Okay, and the teachers have spoken to this too. Where is my option if I feel like it's patently unsafe that the CDC, the CDE, and lots of public health people say without social distancing, it is patently unsafe. So you are forcing me then to say my kid has to go virtual because your kid, wait, let me finish, because your kid wants to go 5 days, or you want your kid to go 5 days, which I think is patently unsafe to me. So you're taking away my choice because I think virtual is a terrible choice. So, but I think 2-day hybrid is a good choice because you can social distance. The main thing that scientists say is important.
Do you know what I think is awesome about this district is we have always been a district of choice. We are not stuck with two. We're not stuck with two.
Where's the third?
What happens if we had a hybrid? Why is that not on the table?
We are talking about a hybrid.
No,
Why
she's talking
couldn't that be
classrooms.
option C?
What do you mean?
Why does it have to be, why is it one or the other? Why could it not be a third choice?
What is it?
She's talking about like the
I don't know what she's talking about. Let her
So what
say
I'm
it.
saying is that I do believe parents should have the ability to dictate where their children go. I believe that if they want them at a hybrid, it would be amazing if we could provide a hybrid. If they want them full-time, it would be amazing to provide full-time. And if they want them 100% online, that would be great. Now, here's the part B. We got to figure out where our staff is because this is our team. So we may have staff that wants to do all three. And and what I am suggesting is so much work for everybody.
It's more than so much work. You can't have
Let her
three
finish.
options.
But that's not true. We have K-8 schools. We have independent charter schools. We have dependent charter schools within our district. This is what we pride ourselves on. We are a district of choice. We provide so many options. I don't know. I don't think it's beyond thinking we could have three options here.
Okay.
I think it could take a long time to figure out. A
I
very
don't-
long
I-
time.
I
don't
think you
have
guys
a-
are.
I think-
I know.
Yeah.
I think you guys can do amazing things, and I think we can't really have this conversation.
I expect that third plant tomorrow on my desk at 8 o'clock in the morning. Make it happen.
You're a wonderful board. Just don't tell me not to work weekends anymore, okay? Just don't tell me not to.
We've explored all three options already, and the other thing is we are very premature in having this conversation because we have not heard from our staff.
Right.
And the landscape's changing.
And I just want to say, we've heard from our staff, but not enough. It's not like we're not hearing from, I mean, the point of the committee was to say, administrators on the committee, go talk to your staff. I said to staff members, these are the people on the committee, go talk to them. Yeah, we did a survey on their choices around creating the hybrid model. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. We need to do more, and we will.
Good. Mr. Wyndham.
Thank you. This is kind of goes to what I was talking about earlier. Again, we have to remember there is not going to be perfect solutions. This is not going to be, I mean, we're not going back to school the same way that it was left in March, okay? But, I mean, to some example, like the smoking issue. It's not illegal to smoke in front of me. You can smoke in front of me. I don't like it. I might argue with you about it. It's illegal to smoke in a certain distance of a business or on a school campus. So, and I say that because the reality is that, yes, people still get to make choices, and even if they're not choices that I like, and that's the problem here, is that at some point we're going to have to address, either we're going to, and this is what I've been saying all along, either we're going to have some respect for parent choice and staff choice, and if they're in conflict, we're going to have to sit and figure it out, okay? I don't know if that means 3 options. I know one district did it. I am skeptical that that's something that we can do and what the cost of that would be. Now, my point for all of this is I kind of agree with what Tracy said, because if you listen carefully to what Dr. M, and I like Dr. M because I can't ever get it right either, what he said was very, very practical. Either A, you're going to go with, the idea of trying to contain it, which isn't going to happen, and you're going to go with zero risk. In that case, everybody's going to stay home, which according to AB 77 might not be something that's even really an option depending on where we're at the time. Or you're going to talk about there's risk. There's risk in everything. So I do agree with Tracy that we're going to have to decide what is that level of risk. And that's something that teachers, I think, need to know too, because there is a point, there isn't going to be zero risk. There's never going to be zero risk. There may not be zero COVID risk for years to come. And so whatever we do, I keep saying this because I think we really need to understand that this is a long-term issue. So when we're talking about getting input, we're going to have to set the benchmark as to what are we getting input about. Because I think what we've heard tonight is I think a lot of staff would feel safer staying home. And I understand that. I really do. Unfortunately, that's not the way the world works all the time. I don't know. I mean, it just isn't. And I don't know, maybe there's a hybrid model. But at some point, we're going to have to address how we're going to educate our kids. And I'm just concerned now that we're just asking questions. And again, I'm not a big fan, I said this before, I'm not a big fan of asking questions of people when it's a question that doesn't mean anything because we can't really consider it. And that's my only concern with staff. I think we need to set some benchmark as to is it negligible risk or is it zero risk?
I'm hearing a lot of zero.
Thank you, Mr. Wyndham. Dr. Jane, did you have more stuff for us?
Dr. Jane, I'm getting you a superhero.
Very quickly, just very quickly. Thank you, Brandon. Okay, trying to remember what I have here.
Take a moment, gather your thoughts.
Did this go to the next slide? So just real quickly, I wanted to review what we talked about at the proposed AB 77. Again, the language about to the extent possible in person, and go to the next slide, we already saw that. So this was the quote, again, from Kevin Gordon from Capital Advisors. These provisions were intended to limit the use of distance learning as the only strategy for instruction as opposed to a blended hybrid approach. The hybrid model is absolutely allowed as long as distance learning meets the requirements. So just want to reiterate that yes, it's not a restrictive proposed language in the bill it's probably likely to go through, that there is an expectation throughout the state that districts will use a hybrid model. You can do next slide. So very briefly, these are some of the things that they talk about what districts distance learning should include. Obviously, connectivity, content aligned to grade level standards, addressing English learners, foster youth, students with exceptional needs. Next slide. They mentioned special ed. They talk about English language development and daily live interaction, which I want to read something to you from what it says, because I kind of like it. Daily live interaction with certificated employees and peers for purposes of instruction, progress monitoring, and maintaining school connectedness. This interaction may take the form of internet or telephonic communication or by other means permissible under public health orders. If daily live interaction is not feasible as part of regular instruction, the governing board or body of the local education agency shall develop, with parent and stakeholder input, an alternative plan for frequent live interaction that provides a comparable level of service and school connectedness.
So it's pretty comprehensive, and I like the fact that it lays out what the requirements and expectations are around distance learning. So I would like to wait and hope that that bill passes. You can do the next slide. But in the meantime, these are some of the things that we're working on. We've got 4 organizations now that are willing to work with us for organizations for childcare, for elementary, for a lot of the issues with a lot of elementary parents concerned about going back to work and childcare. TGIF 11, imagine that, in Vacaville Boys and Girls Club, and they're meeting with our Director of Student Attendance and Welfare, Romero, next week to work on plans and spaces they can use or places they already have. They would be in a larger space. They'd have outdoor options. The Boys and Girls Club, for example, has smaller ratio. So it would be a safe, socially distanced opportunity for childcare for those parents that have concerns about going back to work. Next slide. And, go back, sorry. So we continue to work on the remote learning program. We are working on HR's starting to work with Ryan, our director, around teachers that may be interested in teaching this. He's working on the program and make sure that it would ensure grade level standards and skills. And secondary is looking at two options that they're going to bring back to you, that they've showed both options to you. One is what they call quasi-mesters, and the other is all 6 classes. And I think we are really going to have to separate out high school and middle school, especially hearing from the middle school teachers here. So we are continuing to work on the plan. It's pretty much what we've been spending a lot of our time on. So basically, we can discuss, you can give me as much direction, but I don't think we're ready to vote. And what I'm finding is most districts, there's a lot of districts throughout the state that are really making the decision in July.
Very good. Can I check in with Miss Shelley first? I lost track of your text. Did you have a comment or are we good? Nope, good. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to put somebody in front of Michael again. Okay, Mr. Kitsis.
Thank you, and I will be quick. I think this was really good. I mean, I'm not mad at anybody, and I don't think anybody's mad. You know, we need to be strong about what we think, and that gives everybody an opportunity to hear and hopefully coalesce their own opinion around it, and that's how we'll kind of get moving forward. So I appreciate your comments.
You're welcome.
And somewhat appreciate Sean's too. So, all right, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Silva. Hold on, there we go.
It's gone. Actually, it's
Did you want to see something on the screen?
Yeah, I actually
Michael?
wanted to see the breakdown of responses from the surveys again.
Okay.
But I think really where I'm trying to, my glasses are fogging up here. One more. All right, so I'm curious to see what percentage, if we break down elementary from 7 through 12, so TK through 6.
Oh, you want to see the grade level, so go to the next one.
No, sorry, it's not here, but I
Oh.
would like, so you can go to the next one, sir.
Yeah, that has grade level.
I'm curious to see if there's any discrepancy between those different age groups, between TK and 6, and their responses compared to 7 through 12, or actually maybe even TK through 2. So I don't know if that's able to, if you guys are able to play around with that.
Yeah.
So
I can send you that. I can do that.
Great,
I'll
thank
send you the numbers, sure.
Appreciate it. I guess what I'm really troubled with, I said during the workshop, and I'll reiterate here, I am not comfortable going against state safety guidelines. Period. I think a denial and a vilification of anything science by a segment of our society and the information that we share and put out there exacerbates this problem. And for me, it's really upsetting, not just because it's my profession, but because it's my community, it's my kids, it's the country and the world that I want to grow up in. And from what I see is I've seen tremendous examples where we have our IT department coming out reprogramming computers to make sure kids have access. I see our nutrition services going every single day, 5 days a week, putting on their masks, serving the whole community. Don't even ask questions, right? I see parents stepping up and delivering food for other kids that don't have access to it. So I see all these great things of people going out of their way to make a difference, to help each other out, which is to me what America is supposed to be about, what community is supposed to be about. And I'm really frustrated because we're in this situation because we have a denial or acceptance of anything that has to do with science. And in my opinion, a respect of science, a respect of what people advise, or what people who dedicate their lives and careers towards, is the only thing that's truly going to help us get out of this or help us manage this. I totally agree that we'll only be able to minimize the issues, but we are in this position because we've continued to deny anything that have to do science related, or we roll our eyes if we talk about STEM education or anything like that, just to educate our kids and each other, our community, on how we can question and respect the information that's put out there. I think when Dr. Matches also explained, and I'm not attacking you, I just want to precurse that.
So what happened last time, huh? Want to scoot this way?
No, when he explained that, so measles, going back to John's favorite term, R naught, yeah. So measles has an R naught value of about 15, right? It's not a very, it's not that it's a very deadly disease, it's that it's a highly contagious disease, right? And the thing about measles is that there's a vaccine for it. So, and when people don't choose to protect themselves in that way, which is their choice, and I respect that choice, that's where we see outbreaks and problems associated with that. But we're fortunate enough to have these protections to help protect our kids and our community and our elders. So it just there's still a lot of known with this, and for me, again, where I'm at with this, and I'll clearly state again, I am not comfortable going against any state guidelines. I respect the fact that parents definitely want their kids at school. I want my kid at school 100% as well, but not at the jeopardy or the sacrifice of other people's safety. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Silva. All right. So, first thing, I'm glad we're not voting on this tonight, and I know we're not doing that. Second thing is go down my list real quickly. I think we need to make sure that, and you stated it earlier, Jane, we need to over-communicate this. We got to communicate a little bit more to everybody. And I know we're missing our communications, director, but we can compensate for that. And I think one of the consistent things I've heard from a lot of the speakers tonight is that they didn't know, or they didn't have input. So if we can make it a goal to make sure that we're over-communicating, I know that's a lot more work, but I think it's what we need right now. I'd like to see what we talked about earlier is a plan of, if we do have a known exposure, what's our immediate action until we can gain some information from the health department and go from there. I'm not thinking AB 77 is going to be a save-all. I think it's just going to push us in the direction that we're going already, is we need to get kids in the seats. It's just, how do we do it, and how do we do it safely? I do appreciate that they have the distant learning aspect in there. And as everybody stated, this is a different school years to come. So we're going to have to act a little bit differently. I have an issue with the state law that requires, we talked about the June 30th deadline, right? And I get it. Normal world, life is good. June 30th, tell us yes or no, and we'll move on from there, and give us time to make game plans and stuff. But I don't know if there's any wiggle room in that. Maybe the wiggle room is, you need to tell us by June 30th, but maybe we'll give you a couple more weeks on our end. Figure out a timeline that's workable, labor negotiation wise, all that other stuff, that we give them a little bit more time. They have to do it legally, but is there a waiver room in there? Just a thought, I don't know, because they have to make a decision before we get to make a decision, right? And that's really difficult. So if there's some way to work within that, and we may have to, you may have to try to hire a bunch more people. I don't know, but the timing for this is just off, and it's not a fault of ours. It's not a fault of anybody else. It's just happening. And I think to be relatively fair, that if we can find a balance point in there, that would be good.
Can you expand on that? Is there a waiver we can ask the state for? Like, is that just like there's no wiggle it is, or to his point on the back end, we can create space?
Right in the middle of my conversation, you just open your mouth and talk.
Well, you're used to it.
Filter.
So again, the law says they have to return their intent.
Sorry.
The law says they have to return their intent to return by June 30th. It doesn't say what we have to do with it, right? So it gives us the right, if they don't return by June 30th, to decide, oh, they're not returning to work for us. Why in the world would we do that at this point?
Yeah.
Right? There's absolutely no reason to do that. So we'll definitely work with the union on that. I would.
And I'm not directing you, please.
I
mean,
don't think we have any right or ability to override. And I wouldn't even want to ask them to put themselves in that situation. I mean, they should return it, by June 30th to be safe. I don't think we have the right to waive it.
Not that date was not my intent. Everybody should have their thing, and it's the law. Have it in there. There's no waiver that's anybody's going to grant us in that time period. But it's on the back end.
It's what we do with it.
Yeah, it's how we handle it as a team.
Why in the world would we do anything
Perfect.
to harm our employees?
I just wanted to hear everybody get to hear you say that.
Thank you.
Now you just screwed up my whole train of thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time, so we'll go from there. All right. So with that, I don't know where our direction is. I know we're not going to vote on that tonight. I did have a conversation with someone today that talked about the potential of starting school later. And I know that might have to deal with calendars and labor and things like that. Just going to throw that out there. I don't know where we're going to be on the 7th or 8th or 9th and of where we're meeting and what the data is going to show. And I don't even know if we'll be able to make a decision by then, depending on how everything is so dynamic and going on.
The calendar is negotiated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's have to be negotiated.
Yeah, yeah. Just as a, something to throw out there, maybe allowing for more time. And I know that would screw everybody's up, but just an option out there. Okay, I'm done. Oh no, we have more. Don't go anywhere. Woo! All right. Everybody good? Miss Shelley, you good? Thumbs up? Fantastic. Okay, so with that, we will move on to the consent calendar. And can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
I'll move it.
Moved by Malberg. Second by Mr. Kitsis. All, roll call vote.
Mrs. Daly, your vote? It's a yes, thank you. Mr. Wyndham?
Yes.
Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that future business, we have a regular governing board meeting on August 6th, 2020. We will have a special one, so probably sometime between now and then, which we'll definitely post and advertise as well. I got to say before we close, I really like this Zoom ability of people attending. It just gets us, sometimes it gets pretty boring in here. Right, and it allows for a lot more participation. So I don't know if that's something we could look towards the future of maybe keeping a hybrid model of that. I think that would be a good thing, right? Oh, look at that, hybrid, huh? Hybrid board meeting. Yeah. More input, the better. Okay, we're not going back to closed session, but don't go anywhere. We're going to adjourn this meeting. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and during that 5-minute break, if you wouldn't mind opening up the chat and getting people who would like to speak on the next meeting. That would give us some time for that. And we'll see you in 5.
Take your lack of emotions and sit down.
I'm leaving.
Oh, I'm leaving. Oh, take your
I
ball and go
already
home.
made my decision
Take your ball and go
about
home.
graduation.
There's still a bunch of people on that Zoom. But no one wants to.
Really? They're all here?
Okay, here we go. We are going to call to order the special governing board meeting that was supposed to start at 8. We're just a little late. We're doing all right. We do have a quorum, and is there, Dr. Jane, any changes to the agenda as proposed?
No.
Fantastic. Can I get a motion to approve? Motion by Silva, second by Kitsis. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Dowell, your vote? I see you. I don't see you. Oh, there you are. That's a yes vote. Thank you. Mr. Wyndham? Mr. Kitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes. So item number 4 is comments from the floor on items on the agenda only. And just to confirm, we don't have anybody, and the chat's been open. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to number 5, action items. 5A, in-person graduation ceremonies. Board will discuss the vote on in-person graduation ceremonies which may take place on the previously agreed upon July dates for Buckingham Collegiate Charter Academy, Vacaville High School, Wilsey Wood High School, and Country High. Hopefully I got them all there. I didn't mean to miss anybody. And comments, questions, motions, anything?
I'll move that we host July graduations, if you put it that way.
Okay, I have a motion by Tracy, a second by Sean. We'll get to that. I just want to get that on.
I just wanted to.
Just get that on record. All right, and we're gonna start. Miss Shelley, do you have anything? I'm gonna let you go first.
Oh, gee, thanks.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I have to tell you that up until today, I was definitely going to vote yes because I like to honor what a committee does. I feel committee work's very important. I also thought the plan was well thought out, but I did take the extra step of writing to the CDHP today, the state, and I got back something that basically says, wait, I'm trying to get my email up. It basically said we can't do it until we're in phase 4, that the only large gatherings that are allowed are faith-based or cultural, and cultural does not really mean a school graduation. I don't really want to argue that, but it's not. And that everything else is not okay. And under those circumstances, and I can read it to you exactly if I can bring it up again, it says, what is it? I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared to go first. I'll have to get it up unless somebody else has it, because I know some other people were interested in the same thing. But that was the bottom line. So under those circumstances, I cannot vote for it. Although I truly want it, I hope that we can do it for these kids. I want to honor it, but I'm just thinking that I cannot vote for our district to do something that the state and the county, even though Mateus said, you know, in his words, if we did it this way, we could do it. It's still, we're not in phase 4 in the county and we're not in phase 4 in the state. So I don't see how we possibly could do this. And I know that one county has done it, but that's one county, one school district out of 400 school districts. And I don't know why we would be number 2, especially when the numbers are going up like this. So I would have to vote no on this. That's where I stand.
Thank you, Miss Shelley. Miss Sheree.
Hey, can you talk to us a little bit about what she was referencing, and then what your what the district's precautions for the graduation.
I don't know what the
Okay.
opinion is, but I can read to you. I won't read the whole thing, but state public health directives prohibit professional, social, and community mass gatherings. Gatherings are defined as meetings or other events that bring together persons from multiple households at the same time for a shared or group experience in a single room, space, or place, such as an auditorium, stadium, arena, large conference room, meeting hall, or other indoor or outdoor space. On May 25th, 2020, in an effort to balance First Amendment interests with public health, the state public health officer created an exception to the prohibition against mass gatherings for faith-based services and cultural ceremonies, as well as protests. These types of gatherings are now permitted indoors so long as they don't exceed 100 attendees. It goes on to state public health directives now do not prohibit in-person outdoor faith-based services or protests as long as physical distancing is followed. All other mass gatherings are prohibited until further notice, except as otherwise specifically permitted in state public health directives. So what she said about cultural ceremonies is questionable, but they say in an effort to develop First Amendment, they're talking about your First Amendment right to religious practice and the right to assemble against your government, basically, and those are the protections. Yeah.
You good? Sean.
So I'm going to throw a caveat out there. I think no matter what, if we have the will of the board to proceed, I think there's always going to be the possibility that things could change. I think we need to throw that out there because we don't know what's going to happen. But I think at its core, I understand what you're saying, Jane, and it's just really difficult from somebody who has been in a position of, well, I won't even go there. It's difficult for me to understand how the science and people's rights are different depending on the motivation. And that's the problem here, is you're telling people that, well, if it's for this purpose, it's okay. But if it's for that purpose, it's not. So I think fundamentally that is so flawed that I don't know how I can support that. I don't think that makes sense. If you said it's blanket no gatherings, I think that, I wouldn't like it. I would still question the government authority to tell me when and where I can go, because I don't know that that's what our founding fathers meant, but I think I could at least get a little bit more behind that than picking and choosing as to the reason for the gathering, because that, I don't know that the virus is discerning why someone is gathering. The second point that I want to make with this is, we talked about it, this is not something that people are compelled to do. I guess if we invite a church there, maybe we're all good, right? Because then it becomes, I don't know, maybe we can protest something over there. But here's the bottom line, is this is not something people have to do. We're not compelling people to come there. This is something that even the attorney said, I think waivers can, I understand the whole state issue, but I think there's a lot of us that question the authority of the state when they're picking and choosing when that authority is going to be imposed. So for me, for just a constitutional perspective, there's no way that I can support saying no. I think that there's going to be inherent risks. If you want zero risk, then you probably can't leave your house. But I think with waivers and paying attention to making sure that the spike is not so severe, there is a point when even I would say, yeah, I think we need to stay home. But at this point, given those factors, and yeah, I'm not being politically correct here, I'm just saying it like it is. That is my issue, and that is why there's no way that I can support anything but saying yes for this thing. So, thanks.
Ms. Tracy.
So I just want to say too that besides the waivers, it's not indoors, it's outdoors, and it's optional. If we host a graduation with distance and PPE and all the parameters, I'm totally okay with going rogue and being progressive and being different and honoring the commitment that we made to our families, because if a family is uncomfortable, that goes back to a point where we're not at school yet, so we can at least do this. If people are not feel unsafe, they don't have to come. Right? We're hosting a graduation as we promised, with all the safety mechanisms we can in place. So I totally agree with what Sean says. I think it's asinine to think that we are going to pick and choose when the science applies and when it doesn't. And I don't think that's a great example to give to kids, even though it's the First Amendment right. And I totally think protests are great, but the fact is nobody enforced a 6-foot PPE rule for protesting. Now, if they were out there enforcing, you can't protest, you don't have a mask on, you can't protest, you're not 6 feet away, cool, they didn't. So I think I'm with Sean, but I also made the motion, so you know where I stand.
Mr. Kitsis.
I hate these microphones. Okay, according to Tracy, here's the asinine perspective. I'm joking, but you said it was asinine.
I do, I'm okay. My school's good, I have to own it.
So to me, I'm just gonna tell you where I'm at. I feel really, really sad for people that want a graduation. It's a moment that is special, and I feel you. I mean, I do. My daughter graduated a couple years ago. I have a 10th grade son going into junior year. So I'll just be really kind of brief. So what it says is, the state public health directives now do not prohibit in-person outdoor faith-based services or protests as long as physical distancing of 6 feet between persons or groups of persons from different households maintained at all times. All other mass gatherings are prohibited until further notice. So it can't be more direct than that. And not that it needs support of that, but Mike talked about the science before. COVID cases have gone up 332% in the last week in Solano County, just in Solano County, the highest percentage increase in all of the Bay Area. Deaths haven't gone up, but deaths usually follow about 4 to 6 weeks. So I don't know, we'll see what happens. Our attorney advises that we will have increased liability if we do it. He sent us a long opinion only 9 days ago. Our insurance company said they probably wouldn't cover anything COVID related. We were informed by the California Department of Public Health that they would not permit in-person graduation until stage 4. We're in stage 3. We're not in stage 4. If we do this, I believe that we'll be terribly exposed. Might nothing happen? Absolutely. But if something does happen, I think our attorney basically told us that, they can sign liability forms, but, when you're doing something that's against state guidance, they might not hold up. I also, just to say, there was an email a few weeks ago on June 3rd, which was somebody from Solano County Public Health, a health educator, sent an email to Elaine, Jennifer Leonard, and a couple other people. And she said that the California Department of Public Health had informed her that we could not do an in-person graduation. And I actually just wanted to know if it's still held, and I emailed her today, and she didn't actually email me, and just till now, and she said, yes, in-person graduations are not permitted until stage 4. They gave me a call about this too, reiterating the same information. So I am clearly no, I feel bad for the parents, of course, but I can't put the district in that kind of jeopardy.
Okay. Yeah. Hold on, let me get you there. Okay.
Did every site had some formal graduation ceremony although drastically modified.
Yeah, we had for the high schools, the virtual graduation
And some of them
ceremonies.
even had a chance to kind of do a drive-through.
Those were the 6th and 8th grade did the drive-through. There were drive-through yearbook. There were drive-through like yearbook pickups and those kind of things. But the virtual actually, I know I thought they were beautiful. They took a lot hours and hours and hours and hours of work. Elaine spent hours, days working on them.
When we and yeah, I think I feel that we all I know we all very much appreciate all the efforts that went into there and try to work around it. So my understanding when the committee made the recommendations, part of it also came to see, part of it was like, we'll put it at towards the end of the summer, and then we'll kind of see where things were at as far as cases.
Yeah, the attachments I provided, the packet I provided showed the precautions we take if there was a graduation ceremony, but showed the original letter that went out when Elaine worked with the committees. And it said that, the committee said, yes, let's do a virtual on the day of the graduation. And then we want dates later on if we are able to have a live one. And the first date was July 25th. So here we are, today talking about July 25th. The next one is August, which if you decide if the board decides no on the July, then the next step would be in August. And then the next one was, I believe, November for a couple of schools. I think most of the schools had it. They were thinking like after the Thanksgiving break. I can't pull up the attachment, but I think at least 2 of the schools had a November date. And I don't know if other schools had September, October, but they all picked 3 dates, basically.
Right. Were there other high schools in our area that have since, from today
Had
to your
in
knowledge?
person?
Yeah, or some modified in person.
Vaca Christian did. They have Vacaville Christian had.
But no others in Solano County?
Not in Solano County. There were some in Kern County, but were there some others in Solano? Who did?
I think Jesse Beth. I know there's a couple in Blair. I don't know all those details.
That did live in person?
From what I was,
I didn't know that.
I'll confirm. I might be wrong, but that's what I was told.
Okay, and then so I guess my question really I'll just put it like this, I guess. So I'm trying to put myself in this position. Like Shelley expressed, I was gonna be fine with it. I thought that the distancing was acceptable, but I also recognize or can't ignore the fact that cases are going up. And people who attend there may sign a liability, but what about those who they interact with thereafter? That's just a question that I have hovering over my conscience. I think that I think again the concept, and I've heard different perspectives. Is I feel that the goal is to limit again the spread of this infection that we're still this virus that we're still trying to learn about. Our graduation ceremonies and ed code. It's a question. I don't know. Do you know if graduation ceremonies?
I'm sorry.
Are they required in ed code?
No. And we actually have board policy that actually, and that was actually in the legal opinion that it's considered and case law that supports it's considered a privilege, not a right. The ceremony. We have had students in the past that, due to discipline issues, are not allowed to actually walk graduation. So it's something that's considered a privilege, not a right.
Okay, thank you. And I think for me, like, what are we? So, what is the value of? So, I mean, this is just what I'm trying to process. Like, what's the value of when our children walk across that path? I can't even think of the word right now. But stage. Thank you. And you're there in front of all of your fellow classmates, all of the whole community that's been there that supported our kids to get to that point, and seeing them off towards the next journey. Is it the same if 20% attend, 30% attend. You know, only 2 family members attend. I know that's something that's better than nothing, but I guess just for me, it's just you know, for me, I think the risk again outweigh what I think what we're trying to get out of this particular experience. And so I don't know. I was trying to process where I'm at, but again, I feel that, you know, when there's certain regulations and our cases are spiking and we don't know what's going to look like 4 weeks from now, and they say clearly 100% max or no more than 25%, whichever number's smaller. I think that, or whatever the quote is, I'm sorry if I misquoted it. But for these purposes, it was 100 max. I don't feel comfortable going against that, and I'm truly sorry. So, thank you.
Okay, there's apparently some people that would like to chat and for whatever reason didn't get the opportunity. So I know I'll get a bunch of bad glances and stares, but too bad. If you could open up the chat again, please, and we'll allow for some time for people to comment. At least a couple. Yeah, if you guys need to go home, go to bed. Go home, go to bed. We're all good with it. Yeah, get lost. We don't
Get lost.
get lost.
We're just jealous that you.
We're not going to create any more work for you behind your back. Trust us.
Famous last words.
Okay, somebody writing down names? Or is it up to me? I love it. You always have us. Teresa's really glue, take this opportunity that keeps us all together on track, especially in this job of what you have to say and when you have to say things and all that. That's it?
So I'm seeing so far.
Okay. Huh?
Susan.
Okay.
Maybe it's Susan.
All right. So with that, we'll let Miss Sandy go first. And 1 second there, we'll get you live. And Miss Sandy, are you there?
I am. Thank you. Are you?
I can hear you. Good evening.
Much. I know it's been a long night. I've been sitting in my kitchen by myself like a goofball. I just wanted to point something out as a parent and as somebody that's also been following the science and all of that great stuff. I looked at the plan that you put out, Jane, and I think that that's really fair. The idea of, you know, each having two guests only. That's fair. I get that. And that eliminates, you know, the stands and a lot of extra work. As far as people contracting COVID and suing and things like that, the thing is that the last thing on any of our minds as parents is whether or not we're going to get sick if we're being safe. What we want to do is celebrate our children as they should be celebrated as best as we can, like the map you put out. And we would stand 10 feet apart if you'd like us to. We would wear 5 masks if you would like us to. Also, I did listen to what your attorney said too, and he also said that a waiver would give you leverage because it is non-mandatory, like Tracy was pointing out. And in the verbiage of the order for phase 3, we're not a concert, we're not a festival, we're not any of those things. And I think when the governor talks about that, he's talking about pro sports and about volume, you know, like Golden State basketball court sits 17,000 people. We're not that. We're just asking to very safely and respectfully walk our children onto that field and get the closure. Sorry, to get the closure for them that they need through all of this. And I really want those that are saying no to rethink that, because at the end of the day, outside in the sunshine, at 6 feet apart, with masks on, we're not going to cause any harm. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Miss Sandy.
Yeah, it's got a real small house, and I hear the kids talk, and as resilient and as strong as they're trying to be, and I give them credit for that, they're broken, and they need this really, really bad. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Miss Susan.
For this conversation most of the evening. I told my son I would really try to speak up. He chose not to. I spent a lot of time these last 3 months trying to encourage him as a high school senior to participate in all these alternate class of 2020 celebrations and recognition events, but he was just not into it. He was so past it. It was like it was already over. Um, I appreciate the effort and the gestures that all of you had made, but to try to make it as memorable as possible. But with that said, let's face it, they really got a raw deal. It just doesn't meet the expectations that have been building with them for 12 long years. It may not have even seemed like it was a big deal to them, but I know it was. Seeing it from his point of view, he worked toward this for 12 long years. And this year he was looking forward to all those special events, senior prom, senior trip, walking the halls those last few weeks of school with his friends, his girl, signing the yearbook, that walk across the stage in front of all his classmates, family, and friends. That was really important. And for those of you who got to experience those events in your lifetime, I'm sure that build-up part may have faded in your memory, but just imagine without warning that the journey you took ended, and right before it was all going to happen, then none of it happens. All of the things that you'd been told that you didn't want to miss out on were just taken away. I know for years I sat with my son just trying, look, it's coming. This day is going to be a big day for you. And then it's all pulled away from them. So I was really at a loss. I mean, a virtual ceremony, I appreciate Michael, Sean. I saw you in the Will C. Wood one. I appreciate you making comments and, trying to wish them well. But my son was nowhere in the room when we were watching that. Those kids, they didn't take it. They've already moved on. They had moved on probably April, May. When they knew that they weren't going to get that graduation, they moved on. And we parents have been really trying to get that back for them. And I'm just at a loss at how to make it. I was at a loss at how to make it memorable. I did everything I could. I never even got to see my son in his cap and gown. He would not even put it on. That's how it wasn't real to him. So I understand all the lawyer things, but I see where there is a possibility to do this. I think the parents are just as passionate, if not more, than maybe I am. But I think we can respect that just to give them that. I think we should really consider it. And Will C. Wood didn't even get. When they went to pick up their diplomas, those kids just come between this time and come get your diploma. At least at Vaca High, they had a speaker, some balloons, somebody was calling their name and at least giving them their diploma. I mean, that's way more. Those Wood kids didn't get any of that.
Miss Susan, your time's about up. If you could.
Yeah, well, Michael knows I'm a chatterbox, but I just really want to impress that upon you. And I understand what Shelley said and all of you, but please, it was the worst.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, Cherie.
I can't let
I can't not touch on, I understand the diploma pickup at Wood was not maybe what they were expecting, but my experience when we picked up my daughter's cap and gown from Wellesley Wood, we waited in line with all the other cars, and the teachers and staff had signs and balloons, and she drove through, and they called her name out on a loudspeaker, and her Toddy B was there. She was so happy to see him, and it was absolutely precious and amazing, and we both cried through the whole thing. So I just couldn't let Wilsey Wood go by without just, I do need to just recognize, yes, that I understand Back High did that different, but Wilsey Wood did that pickup so beautifully. It was so touching.
Toddy B.
Toddy B.
Now you get a
Okay.
superhero logo too. Okay.
All right, so Miss Susan, I know you can't respond back to me, but thank you for bringing back some of those memories. I signing the yearbook and having a blast doing those kind of things. Senior prom, all good things when we think about this. Here's where I am with this. I'm not really comfortable having this with the increased spike, the potential liability. I agree with Sean. I don't like the government telling us what we can do and what we can't do. But as a board, we need to think about the big picture and decrease the risk for the district. I'm not opposed to having this. I'm more suggesting have the ability to do what we wish we could do with school and push it back to the August date. And that would give us more time to see what's going on. I know that's maybe not what everybody wants. They want it in July, and I'd like to have it. But as a compromise to look at the August dates, to be able to do that then, have a better idea of what's going on. And I really hope and pray that we'll be in a better situation where we can move through this. I remember my graduation. That was a fantastic time. I had a great time. You know, senior year was like 7 classes of PE and then just the required government and all that other stuff, right? But, and will we get the same amount of people? No, but if we get some then that need that closure, as one of the speakers stated, I'm just looking for a compromise to be able just not to say no, but maybe to look towards the August dates. I'm not really a proponent of November dates. I know I've spoken at least to you, Jane. I don't think anybody will be there. It'll be truly long gone, but that would be my suggestion. Ms. Tracy.
Is there a way, because the other thing that Sean said that may give us a compromise is to shoot for the the July dates and evaluate it as we go with like an exit clause, because everything is such a moving target. I think the concern that I had heard before was any further than that, we've got kids who are just going to be over it and or gone to college, right? So, and then in November, like you said, it's like, why? So is there, because the motion was in July, but if we had to add some language to that motion to give us an exit clause of whatever that threshold was, if the numbers continue to go up, if we don't have, or are you just like, no, that's too ambiguous? I'm just wondering if there's a way to do both. We can still do it if we, you follow me?
I follow you. I don't know what that threshold would be. I think we'd probably spend the rest of tonight into deep early in the morning trying to figure that out.
I'll be real quick.
It wasn't your turn.
Oh.
I'm fine. He can interrupt me because I need.
Go ahead, Michael. Then Shelley, you'll next.
I deserve it, I guess.
Go ahead. Hold on. Where'd you go?
I'll turn me off.
I didn't mute you. Hold on. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hate this microphone. I am 100% fine if we get to stage 4 and the California Department of Public Health says that mass gatherings are okay. I am completely fine, 100%. So that's my. Well, you're saying
for a threshold.
You asked. You asked.
Yeah.
That's my criteria.
Fair enough.
Miss Shelley, please. It's a tough job over there. You got to actually pay attention, huh? You never know who I'm talking to.
I was going to say the same thing as Michael, because I think the plan's a good I said, I really would have voted yes on it tonight. But as a board member, I feel it's my responsibility to do what the state tells us. And the state has said no mass gatherings other than faith-based and cultural and protests. And Sean, those are in there because of the Constitution. So you were saying that you wanted it to be constitutional. That's the First Amendment. That's why those things are protected and why they have been allowed. A graduation doesn't fall under those kinds of protections. So it's actually the state was following the Constitution by doing that. So that's, I just have to say, I wish I could do it. I understand where you parents are coming from. I know, I mean, I have a grandson in Indiana. He's in the same situation and he would love to have a graduation. His was virtual. This was the entire country and actually the globe. So it's not like we're operating and we as a school board are doing this to you. We are just upholding our responsibility to the district as well as to the children. And I think we did the best we could, and I hope we can have one. So I would be happy to vote yes if we reach phase 4, or if there's special permission from the state to go ahead and have these kinds of graduations. And maybe we can seek that.
Thank you, Shelley. Sheree?
I'm 100% with Sean, and I love you to death, Shelley. And my argument would be this is a cultural experience for our children. This is part of what we do in the United States culturally. This is part of that. You do the 12 years, you get the experience. So we have a difference of opinion, and I love you. You know, I love you to the moon and back. And I also know I'm the minority on this deal. So, but I don't want us just to say we're not doing this. I want us to make sure that we're trying to get it done in August. But I would love us, I'd like to at least have an agreement as a board that if we get to stage 4, then it's a done deal. We don't have to bring this back for a vote.
Can I ask a question about that? What if we get to August and we're not in stage 4? Because I mean, part of the vote is, are we willing to push the envelope because philosophically or whatever, and maybe not, like maybe we're still in the minority, but what I'm hearing is that it's one or the other. That if we either get to stage 4 by August and yay us, or we're not gonna do it. My question was, with or without stage 4, we didn't get sanctioned, but the blessing of a good plan from our public health officer, waivers that we were willing to accept the liability. I'm okay with being a minority vote because I accept that liability fully informed and believe that parents have the right to choose if they show up or not. So for me, that's the caveat in that decision.
Sean?
Just a couple things. First of all, I do have a little bit, I just want to clarify my constitutional concern. I think the right to assemble is an important one, and I understand that there's First Amendment issues, but I do think that, like Cherie said, I think this is really a cultural issue in many ways, and I think we should view it as such. Having said that, I am disappointed. I don't agree with the folks that are not in support of it, but I understand it and I respect it because this is a very difficult decision. So I appreciate everybody's input on it, and I do respect the decision because there is the other side of it is there is a duty to protect the district, and I personally feel like there is a constitutional issue for me personally that I really feel uncomfortable with, but at the same time I do respect the need to protect the district. So just wanted to throw that out there.
You can amend the motion if you'd like.
So just to the other dates, there is August 7th, Buckingham, Wellsea, Wood, and Vaca High was July 25th, and then in person the Saturday following homecoming.
Okay. Ms. Shelley,
When is homecoming? What
please, if you could activate her.
September. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say some people are concerned that Vaca Christian had it. They have only about 100 and something graduates, so their mass gathering was obviously much smaller.
It's 40 or 50. It's 40 or 50, I think.
They had 40 or 50 graduates? Yeah, so they had a much smaller group. Other people think, well, it's happening all over the country. We live in California and we're following our state guidelines, and it's our state guidelines that said stage 4. There are not a lot of districts in our state that have done it. The only one I'm aware of is Kern, and other people can tell me there's others, but I have been researching this all week because it's close to my heart. So I really understand where parents are coming from, but I really, we have to look at what is in our state, where we live right now, and the numbers of people that we're talking about and what constitutes a mass gathering. And Cherie, to your point, to me it's cultural also, but I don't think that's the cultural definition, and maybe we can ask that. That might be one thing to ask CVHP, is what do they define as their cultural, I think they mean like Kwanzaa maybe, things like that, but I'm not positive what exactly is cultural versus faith-based. Thank you.
So are we voting or amending? Tracy?
I need help. Just so you know, just so you know, because there were choices of dates down the line, that basically what the committee said, if we can't do it on this July date, then we'll go to the next date. So if the board doesn't agree on this, I will be back when we get close to the August date. I will. I'll just come back with the request.
So I'll leave it as it stands, knowing that that you'll come back.
I will.
If the phases change even before the 25th.
I will.
I'm even willing to go with, if it goes into stage 4, you don't have to come back to us.
I'll
So-
just tell
so
you
we
we're
say-
doing it.
We say that's
Yeah.
fine. You
That's
can
true.
just do it.
Yes.
So that's
absolutely.
my amendment to the motion, that if we move into stage 4, and then it's acceptable to the California Department of Public Health, that we give the superintendent the option to plan the graduation with parents.
I need a second on that, don't I? Or-
Wait, no, we need to kill my motion because we either vote it or I'll.
No, you didn't
rescind it.
move it.
No, he just amended it.
I already moved and Sean seconded the first.
Right,
motion.
so I tried to amend it.
And
That's
he
what you do,
amended the
that's what you
motion.
do first. And then you vote on my motion. If you kill it, it goes back to the first motion.
Well, I think you need a second, right?
Mike second.
Okay.
Second by Mr. Silva.
Is this time for discussion? So for clarity
Sure.
on it? Okay, so just with the amendment, what I'm having a hard time processing is that to me, I would have to vote no. Not because I don't agree with you kind of, but because that's agreeing to stage 4.
Yes, if you don't agree to that, you'd have to vote no, and then if the majority voted no, it goes back to the original.
And what I heard Jane said is if we leave the motion as it stood to have a graduation in July, and I was willing to put an amendment to Sean's point about an exit clause if numbers continued to rise. Because that's what you were alluding to, that like if numbers were continuing to rise, we are prudent, right? That we wouldn't put anybody at risk, right? And so since it's so ambiguous, and so that was kind of the amendment that I was thinking of, not the other side of that token. So
I think regardless, the amendment's on the table. So
okay, so that okay.
So we need to vote on the amendment.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could amend my motion if you want. There's,
My brain's motion. Somebody else.
Yeah.
Sean, step up.
Miss Teresa, what's the easiest way to deal with this?
So we operate under Rosenberg's. You can have up to 3 motions on the floor at one time. So we have 2 at this point. If you can do a couple things, you can put forth another motion, another amended motion, if someone has one to bring forth. If not, then we would start with the vote on the most recent motion, which is Mr. Kitz's amended motion. And if that, depending on what the vote is on that, if it fails, then you would go back to the first one.
Wow, Teresa.
And vote on it
Very
then.
nice.
And I hope I got it all.
Can I ask a quick question?
Hold on. So we're gonna go Mr. Wyndham, and then Miss Dally has a question next, so if you can get ready with that. Sean?
I guess my question on the motion, I don't have an issue with as long as we're not at this point saying that also applies to August. I want to be able to talk about it in August. If I don't want to preclude August. So if we're talking about this month, that your motion only pertains to July, or any time it goes to stage 4. It does not say if it's not.
Any time it goes to stage 4, then Jane can can do it, if you want to do it.
Or she could, she still is gonna bring it back regardless to talk about it in August.
Even if we
Okay.
don't get to stage 4. Yes, I will.
Okay, then I'm good.
Okay.
Ms. Shelley.
I'm gonna throw something in the hat here that you might not like, but our next meeting is July 6th, and there are some questions that needs to still be answered, which is some people really don't believe that the language and the verbiage is about stage 4 and feels that we do have permission. And I feel like because we're having this discussion as putting it to stage 4, that needs clarification. Would it be a horrible thing to postpone this vote till we get that information and have it on July 6th? Is that too late to organize this thing?
You can make a motion if you want, but the motion's on the table.
Say-
That's not how it works.
She's asking a
Hold on.
question so she can make an educated motion.
A what?
She's asking a question so she can make an educated motion, or
Okay,
not.
so you're asking James.
Yeah, she's directing it to
So did you say you want me to confirm the directive from the state? Is that what you're saying?
I guess I want to, yes, that's a question, because everything boils down to this, we're in phase 4, and if indeed that is not the issue with this graduation, then I think the answer is easy. And if it is, then that's another easy answer. So we're voting on something that may postpone it, and it may not be the issue. Does that make sense?
I don't know what the question is, though, about stage 4.
She wants clarity on, can we
I want to get
justify?
clarification on if indeed the verbiage that we have read today about it not being allowed as a gathering until stage 4 is correct in terms of graduation.
Okay.
That seems to be the question that people are posing, is that is not an accurate statement.
I also, though, your question about cultural, the definition of what's a cultural gathering, that would be a good thing to get to.
And so the other question I have, Jane, is we're waiting till July 6th to make this definite decision based on these answers. Too late to schedule a graduation at the end of the month.
No, it's not. Correct, Mr. They can plan it. I'm looking to my
No
expert.
pressure.
That is really tight timeline.
Okay.
But
Sorry, kind of throw it in there.
It's a tight timeline. Because the first one, I think, is scheduled the 17th or 18th, so.
We have a lot of parents who help set up chairs.
Yeah.
No, I'm just.
Mr. Kitsis.
yeah, you know, if you, I don't, at this point, you want to push it on to another thing, it's okay. You wrote the California Department of Public Health, and they sent you this back, okay? I got an email today that said the Department of Public Health said in-person graduations were not okay until stage 4. So if you want more, we can postpone it if you want to do it again. But at some point, but honestly, if you think that's I'm okay. Frustrated, but okay.
So do you want me to do
So
that?
confused right now.
Do you,
Well, she has to make another motion. Or somebody has to ask me to withdraw my name.
Yes, I understand what you just said, Michael, and I agree with you. And I guess I forgot that you got that second email today that specifically said about graduations, which was my actual question. Is we're making the assumption based on what that said, that graduations were not part of it, and parents are saying, but graduations should be allowed. And so that's why I wanted to double check, but your email basically said exactly that it's not.
You know, this is a bad thing for everybody, including parents. If somebody wants me to withdraw my motion, I'm happy to. I'll do whatever people want.
You can go ahead, I'm fine.
Anybody else? I will.
So can you, Teresa, actually tell me what the motion is currently? The most current
I'm sorry,
one.
I'm just getting a little giddy. Okay, so.
There'll be no fun here.
Okay, the amended motion, as I understand it, that Mr. Kitsis made, is that if when the state moves into phase 4, per the Department of Public Health, to authorize the superintendent to schedule the in-person graduations at all the high schools.
Right, and I'll tell you what, honestly, I have even I can make it better for everybody. John, hook me up.
Michael, you got it. Hold on here. Let's open you up. There we go. You're
Okay,
on.
I will change my motion to say that, to make it until if the state goes to stage 4, we don't have to go back, Jane can do it. Or if Jane finds out that cultural includes a high school graduation, I'm okay with that too. So that kind of takes care of the question that you had, Cherie. I mean, so I'm happy to do that. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Is there a second to that? Oh, please, somebody second this. It's going to get really ugly. No?
Okay, then it goes back to the
Okay.
first one.
I second it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so there is a motion and a second to authorize the superintendent
To plan the
to
graduation.
plan the graduation if we reach stage 4 and/or receive
Permission, right.
clarification,
Yeah.
permission that a cultural celebration includes graduation.
Beautiful.
Good job.
Okay? With that, can I get a roll?
I just need one point of clarification. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
just
Hold on.
I know. I'm not happy with myself right now.
The floor is yours, Ms. Malberg.
This
I
is
love you guys.
just in regards to July 25th, because we will have to have this discussion again, because that's, okay. then
No,
that-
actually, mine is through whenever.
Oh, okay.
Because my criteria is stage 4 or it's
Okay.
permitted by the
Thank you
state.
for the clarification.
Yes.
Okay.
Can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Dally, your vote, please. Yes? That's a yes vote. Okay, Mr. Wyndham?
No.
Mr. Gitsis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stacy?
No.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Malberg?
No.
And Mr. Jansen?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion fails on a vote of 4 to 3. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. Wait, 1, 2, 3.
Teresa, we clapped for you before.
I'm sorry. I didn't write down Mrs. Dally. Yes, okay. My bad. So the motion passes on a 4 to 3 vote.
Thank you, and I sincerely hope that it happens.
Me too. Okay, with that, we are going to move back into closed session. Oh, no, just kidding.
I gotta go.
Sorry.
You are.
Hey, and then just in closing, if there's still somebody on, this was a very serious, hopefully as well thought out as possible. I know, again, we're not going to appease everybody. We really want to make this happen, but again, as safe as possible. So with that, thank you very much, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.